So you've got to go around all of them, and it's quite a detailed business. And that clearly, I want it to be as quick as possible, as you quite rightly said. It's an issue of school safety.
Will there be some kids who've gone back to school today who will get the message at the end of the day from the school to say you can't come back tomorrow? Your name's on the list, you're not coming in.
It's difficult for me to say without seeing the list, of course, but clearly they'll have to look.
Any schools in
so there is a possibility.
So, well, the list isn't complete, so I'd be hostage to fortune if I said until I've seen the whole list.
Khaled, do you know of any schools?
I don't know at the moment. Hopefully I'll find out soon. But luckily we've had some, when the Labour Party was in, we had some real good schools built. So hopefully we'll escape that.
They're politicking away, these two, aren't they?
We're going to be handing you over to the very capable hands now at the live desk with Mark Longhurst and Pip Thompson. Hi, both.
Hello. Well, it is going to be incredibly busy over the next 3 hours. In the last few minutes, that list of schools has finally been published. It is, of course, going to dominate PMQs, but there's plenty of other things to talk about as well, and you might well be satisfied, mightn't you, Mark?
Especially if you like the Rolling Stones or polar bears. I think that's what they call a tease.
Yeah, I like that.
I like polar bears. We have got a polar bear watch going on today.
Yeah.
In this country.
Who's going to win, gentlemen? You know you're going to say Sunak will win. You're going to say...
Sir Keir Starmer, hands down.
Of course it'll be Sunak. Detailed, cool, calm, professional.
What's it like coming back after summer recess for MPs today? Do you have that back-to-school feeling that you're all coming out swinging and you're ready? You got your new pencil case?
Yes.
Don't literally have a new pencil case. But metaphorically, yeah, that's exactly what it's like. You go back to the patch, you spend time with the family. I've got young kids, spend time with them, and then you come back, re-energised and refreshed and ready for the fray. You're
like a coiled spring, Kelly?
Absolutely, ready to go.
And are they going to find any of this dodgy concrete in the Houses of Parliament?
Well, I hope not, because
it's a building site already, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's much longer, unless we find it in Portcullis House. But the rest of it's much older, and so therefore much safer.
And there's a leak in Portcullis House, one of the newest parliamentary buildings.
One of the windows broke, a couple of the windows broke, actually, just at the end of July term. Right. And they've managed to fix them, thank God. Right. But work in the Parliament takes a huge amount of excessive time. Actually written in to the Sergeant-at-Arms, we've got the scanners under the gates coming through, and that's going to take a year to put 2 scanners in for the cars. And it's absolutely ridiculous the time it's taking, so...
All right. Now, just so you can know, the full list of schools that are affected by this dodgy concrete is going to be published on GBNews.com. So get there. We hope it's not your kids' schools, but if it is, hopefully they're on the case.
Yeah, right. We're done for this week. No, we're not. I keep thinking it's Thursday.
No, we're back tomorrow, but we've got the live event taken, and of course it's Prime Minister's Question Time is about to kick off, the first one of the new parliamentary programme, and we've got Mark Longhurst and Pip Thompson refereeing.
That's right. See you tomorrow.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman has presented me with information about which I was not aware beforehand. Certainly happy to look at what's been said. But what I would say to him is that the Prime Minister, my right honourable friend the Prime Minister, did the deal which no one said could be done. That has transformed the relationship with the European Union, and I am confident, therefore, that we will be able to deliver a deal on veterinary medicines. But as we sometimes say, I don't recognise the information he's presented. It's new to me, and I shall be glad to look at it, but we will certainly have to deliver a deal.
Teresa Willis.
The Ulster Farmers Union estimate that 1,700 veterinary medicines could be withdrawn from the market in Northern Ireland unless the Windsor framework is fixed. Can I urge the Minister to do that?
Certainly, Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend makes her point with great clarity. Of course, making it on an occasion such as this, it has been widely heard by a wide range of ministers, and I am confident we will be able to redouble efforts to deliver what we need on veterinary medicines.
Can I welcome everybody back to Prime Minister's Questions? Louis French.
Question number 1, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to start by congratulating Serena Wiegman and the Lionesses for their fantastic performance at the World Cup. We are all incredibly proud of them. Mr. Speaker, I also know the whole House will want to join me in sending condolences to the family, friends and colleagues of Sergeant Graham Saville. It is a testament to his bravery that he died in the line of duty, and a terrible reminder of the work the police do every day to keep us safe. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Louis French.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Labour Party used to claim that it represents working-class people. But Labour's ULEZ expansion to Greater London will now hammer millions of working people with bills of £12.50 per day or £4,500 per year. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that it's unacceptable for Londoners and those in surrounding counties to face this regressive and unacceptable tax? And will he do everything that he can to help working people?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I agree with my honourable friend. It is disappointing that last week the Labour leader allowed the Labour mayor to introduce ULEZ, charging hard-working people £12.50 every time they start their car, adding to their burden of the cost of living. All I can say, Mr. Speaker, is while we focus on helping hard-working families, all he does is punish them.
We now come to Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in congratulating the Lionesses and his comments about Sergeant Saville? I think we all speak for the whole House when we speak on that subject. I'd also like to extend the warmest welcome to our new Labour member for Selby and Ainsty. He's already made history for the Labour Party by overturning the largest Tory majority ever in a by-election. And I'd also welcome the honourable members for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, Somerton and Frome. Mr. Speaker, the roof of Singlewell Primary School in Gravesend collapsed in May 2018. Thankfully, it happened at the weekend and no children were injured. The concrete ceiling was deemed dangerous and liable to collapse, and everyone knew the problem existed in other schools. Yet the Prime Minister decided to halve the budget for school maintenance just a couple of years later. Does he agree with his Education Secretary that he should be thanked for doing a good job?
Mr. Speaker, I know how concerned parents, children and teachers are, and I want to start by assuring them that the government is doing everything it can to fix this quickly and minimise the disruption to children's education. We make no apology for acting decisively in the face of new information. And let me provide the House with an update on where we are. Of the 22,000 schools in England, the vast majority won't be affected. In fact, in 2/3 of inspections of suspected schools, RAC is not actually present. And to tackle the 1% of schools that have been affected so far, the 1%, we are assigning each of those schools a dedicated caseworker and providing extra funding to fix the problem. In the majority of cases, children will attend school as normal and the mitigations take typically just days or weeks to complete. We will do everything we can to help parents, support teachers and get children back to normal school life as quickly as possible.
Keir Starmer.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Wood Green Academy in Sandwell was on Labour's building list in 2010. They scrapped it, and now children there are in a crumbling school. The head of the National Audit Office accuses him of taking a sticking plaster approach. The NAO report says he cut £869 million. The person who ran the Department for Education says he is personally responsible. Now, on Monday, he leapt to his own defence, saying it's utterly wrong to blame him. So why does literally everyone else say it's his fault?
Mr. Speaker, the professional advice from the technical experts on RAG has evolved over time, and indeed it is something that successive governments have dealt with, dating back to 1994, Mr. Speaker. Now, as new advice has come forward, the government has rightly, decisively and swiftly acted in the face of that advice. But he talked about school budgets and talked about what I had done, but let me just walk him through the facts of actually what that spending review did, because he brought it up. Well, no, he's brought it up, so presumably he would like to hear the facts. Funding for school maintenance and rebuilding will average £2.6 billion a year over this Parliament as a result of that spending review, which represents a 20% increase on the years before. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, far from cutting budgets, as he alleges, the amount spent last year was the highest in a decade. That spending review maintained, Mr. Mr. Speaker, that spending review maintained the school rebuilding programme, delivering 500 schools over a decade, a pace completely consistent with what had happened previously. And, Mr. Speaker, it is worth pointing out that during the parliamentary debates on that spending review, the Labour Party and him did not raise the issue of RAC one single time. So before he jumps on the next political bandwagon, he should get his facts straight.
Mr. Speaker, Carmel College in Darlington was on the Labour's building list in 2010. They scrapped it, and now children there are in a crumbling school. Yeah. And on the one hand, we have him saying it's nothing to do with him. Yeah. On the other side, we have the facts. And there's a simple way to clear this up. Why doesn't he commit to publish the requests from the Department of Education for the school rebuilding programme and what risks he was warned of before he turned them down?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman has now brought up twice the Labour school rebuildings programme. He's now brought it up twice. So let's just look at that and look at the facts surrounding that, because we do know the truth about that programme, Mr. Speaker, because the NAO, as he's called on, actually reviewed that programme later on. What did they find? They found that Labour's school rebuilding programme actually excluded 80% of schools. Next, what did they find? What did they find? That it was a third more expensive than it needed to be, needlessly wasting resources that have gone to schools. And Mr. Speaker, this is the worst bit. The worst bit is that programme, because now he's talking about the physical condition of schools, that programme only allocated funds solely on the basis of ideology, with no regard whatsoever to the physical condition of schools, Mr. Speaker. That's why the independent James Review described that programme as time-consuming and expensive, just like the Labour Party.
We don't want to start off with somebody leaving so early, because that's what's going to happen. Keir Starmer.
Well, Mr. Speaker, they want more, so let me continue. Ferryhill School in County Durham was on Labour's building list in 2010. They scrapped it, and now children there are in a crumbling school. The truth is, this crisis is the inevitable result of 13 years of cutting corners, botched jobs, sticking plaster politics. It's the sort of thing you expect from cowboy builders, saying that everyone else is wrong, everyone else is to blame, protesting they've done an effing good job, even as the ceiling falls in. The difference, Mr. Speaker, is that in this case, the cowboys are running the country. Isn't he ashamed that after 13 years of Tory government, children are cowering under steel supports, stopping their classroom roof falling in?
No more. Just seriously, I will calm down. First session, I understand people are excited to be back at school, but we expect better behaviour. Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is exactly the kind of political opportunism that we've to expect from Captain Hindsight over here. Before today, he's never once raised this issue with me across this dispatch box. It wasn't even worthy of a single...
It's the same for this side as well. Can I just say, we're going to have a calmer question times going forward. I want to hear the question, I want to hear the answers, just like your constituents, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, before today, he never once raised this issue with me in Parliament. It wasn't even worthy of a single mention in his so-called landmark speech on education this summer. And if we'd listened to him, our kids would have been off school and locked down for longer. It's as simple as that. He talks about 13 years. Well, let's see what happened. When we came into office, 2/3 of schools were good and outstanding. Now it's 90%, Mr. Speaker. We introduced the pupil premium to get more funding to the most disadvantaged pupils, Mr. Speaker. Today, they are 75% more likely to go to university. And as a result of our reforms, we now have the best readers in the Western world, Mr. Speaker. That's That's what 13 years of education reform gets you, all of which opposed by the party opposite.
Well, it claims to be a man of detail. There are 100 parliamentary questions from this side on this issue and an opposition day motion. But, Mr Speaker, let us continue. Holy Family Catholic School in Bradford was on the Labour building list in 2010. They scrapped it, and now children there too are in a crumbling school.
Mr Holden, I think I've heard enough. No then, this is the last time you make your mind up. You either go now or you're quiet for the rest of this.
And, Mr Speaker, if you can believe it, in April this year, the Education Secretary signed a contract for refurbishment of her offices. It's got a personal stamp of approval on it. It cost, I can't quite believe this, £34 million. Can he explain to parents whose children aren't at school this week why he thinks a blank cheque for his Tory minister's office is better use of taxpayers' money than stopping schools collapsing?
Well, Mr Speaker, what I'd say to parents is, in the receipt of new information, we have acted decisively to ensure the safety of children and minimise disruption to education, as we have laid out and communicated extensively. That is the right thing to do. And I would also gently point out to him, Mr Speaker, whilst the Department for Education started this process 18 months ago in spring of last year, as far as I can tell, in Labour-run Wales, they still don't know which schools are affected, Mr Speaker. But again, he brought up this issue of funding, Mr Speaker, and again, let's look back to what happened in that spending review, because in that spending review, I increased the Department for Education's capital budget by 25% to a record £7 billion, Mr Speaker. It tripled the amount that we spend on children with special education needs and disabilities. It improved the condition of the overlooked FE estate, and it set the course for per-pupil funding to be the highest ever. But it also, Mr Speaker, crucially, invested £5 billion to help our pupils recover the lost learning from COVID. £5 billion, Mr Speaker, and he might remember that, because we wanted pupils learning, he wanted longer lockdowns.
I think he just doesn't get how this "it's all fine" out there is so at odds with the lived experience of millions of working people across this country. And, Mr Speaker, let's go on. This is a long list. At least 6 schools in Essex were on Labour's building list in 2010. They scrapped them, and now children there are in crumbling schools. What he won't admit is the reason he cut these budgets, ignored the warnings, is quite simple. Just like he thought his tax rises were for other families to pay, he thinks his school cuts are for other families to endure. Doesn't it tell you everything you need to know? That he's happy to spend millions of taxpayers' money sprucing up Tory offices, billions to ensure there's no VAT on Tory school fees, but he won't lift a finger when it comes to protecting other people's schools, other people's safety, other people's children.
Mr Speaker, I know he comes here with these prepared scripts, but he hasn't listened to a single fact of 6 questions about the record amounts of funding going into schools, about the incredible reforms to education impacting the most disadvantaged children in our society, a record that we're rightly proud of. And yes, of course we can name the schools. That's because we are reacting to information and publishing that information, Mr Speaker, so we know where the issues are, something that we're still waiting for by the Welsh Government in Wales. But Mr Speaker, of course he wants to try and score political points of something that we are dealing with in the right and responsible way. But I do note that he has not mentioned a single other thing that has happened since we last met across these dispatch boxes, Mr Speaker. He talked about hard-working families across Britain, but what's happened? Energy bills, down, Mr Speaker. What's happened to inflation? Down, Mr Speaker. What's happened to small boat crossings? Down, Mr Speaker. And when it comes, Mr Speaker, and when it comes to economic growth, what's happened? It's gone up, Mr Speaker. He tried time and time again to talk down the British economy, but people weren't listening, thankfully. His entire economic narrative has been demolished, and the Conservatives are getting on delivering for Britain.
There will be more. Nicola Richards.
Against a backdrop of improving economic news, inflation falling, energy bills coming down, growth up, people in the West Midlands are disappointed to see that Labour-run Birmingham City Council has gone bankrupt. As a Sandwell resident and a West Bromwich MP, I'm no stranger to Labour incompetence. Does the Prime Minister agree that Labour have demonstrated yet again that they always run out of other people's money?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is exactly right. We started by hearing how Labour in London are charging hard-working people with ULEZ. Now we're hearing about how Labour in Birmingham are failing hard-working people, losing control of taxpayers' money and driving their finances into the ground. They've bankrupted Birmingham, Mr. Speaker. We can't let them bankrupt Britain.
We come to the leader of the SNP, Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, the public needs no reminding that today marks a year since the Prime Minister's predecessor took office. And upon her speedy departure, they will have thought that things were going to get better. But when we look at unemployment figures, they're higher. When we look at food prices, they're higher. When we look at mortgage rates, they're higher. And economic growth is stagnant. So can I ask the Prime Minister, when is he going to get off his backside and do something about it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think what the honourable gentleman failed to point out is that the amount of times I've sat across the dispatches from him and his colleagues and heard how somehow we were a laggard when it comes to growth, Mr. Speaker. What he didn't do is take the opportunity to correct the record today, now that the pub figures have been published, which demonstrate, in fact, we had the fastest recovery out of any European economy after COVID.
Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, you'd be forgiven for thinking that the Prime Minister thinks everything is all right. But let's look at his proposals for the winter when it comes to a cost of living package. Because when it comes to energy bills, his plan, of course, is to do nothing. When it comes to mortgage bills, his plan is to do nothing. And when it comes to food bills, his plan is to do nothing. So when the when the Secretary of State for Education said earlier this week that everyone was doing nothing, she was referring to the Prime Minister, wasn't she?
Mr. Speaker, I think he's a little bit out of practice, because when it comes to energy bills, what we have done is pay for around half of a typical family's energy bill over the past year. Support worth £1,500, Mr. Speaker, benefiting families in Scotland. He asks about mortgages, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor's Mortgage Charter covers 90% of the mortgage market and ensures that a typical mortgage holder can save hundreds of pounds a month when it comes to their mortgage refinancing. And when he talked about energy, thanks to the actions of this government, we are supporting the hundreds of thousands of jobs in the Scottish oil and gas industry, securing this country's energy supply, something that he opposes. I will always do what's right for the people of Scotland, Mr. Speaker, and it's time the SNP did the same.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was delighted when the Prime Minister last year said that on his watch we would not lose swathes of farmland to solar applications, instead rightly arguing for solar to be installed on rooftops. Yet my constituency sees a constant flow of planning applications for solar farms and battery storage plants on food-producing land. So can I ask my right honourable friend, when will his pledge become a reality?
Yeah, quite right. Quite right.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend makes an excellent point. Now, solar is one of the cheapest forms of electricity generation, so it's right that we try and see more of it across the country. But we do need to protect our most valuable agricultural land so that they can produce food for the nation and increase our food security. And that's why, thanks to our changes, the planning system now sets this out explicitly with a clear preference for brownfield sites. Now, of course, we want to do more to encourage barn-top solar, Mr. Speaker, and DEFRA will be updating the House with further information on that policy in due course.
Andrew Bridgen.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Prime Minister stated that he was proud of his furlough scheme. I wonder, Mr. Speaker, if he's equally proud of the 400 billion it put on the national debt and the inflation it's caused. Was he proud of the jobs lost, businesses closed and lives crushed due to the lockdowns? Is he proud of the increased NHS waiting list, premature deaths, and the 1 million young people now needing mental health support? And finally, Mr. Speaker, is he proud of the excess deaths affecting every one of our constituencies that nobody wants to talk about? And will he give an undertaking to the British public, a solemn undertaking that they will never be inflicted upon them ever again?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as the honourable gentleman knows, there is a formal inquiry regarding COVID which will examine all the decisions that were made, including lockdown and the impacts of them. But with regard to the furlough scheme, Mr. Speaker, I am proud that at a time of extreme anxiety in the country, facing an unprecedented situation, that this government put its arms around the British public to ensure that we protected 10 million jobs. And as the report from the ONS showed last week, those actions, combined with all the other things we did to support the economy, ensured that we had the fastest recovery through the pandemic of any European nation.
Dr. Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a nation of animal lovers, the Conservatives' government record on animal welfare is a source of great pride. But sadly, too many abuses remain, from pet theft, the smuggling of puppies and heavily pregnant dogs, and dogs with their ears horrifically cropped, to the illegal export of horses to Europe for slaughter. These issues are personal to me as a veterinary surgeon and to my constituents, especially animal theft and livestock worrying. Can the Prime Minister reassure the House that animal welfare is a key government priority and that he will bring forward the necessary legislation to tackle these issues as soon as possible?
Mr. Speaker, can I thank my honourable friend for both raising this issue but also his work and expertise in the area. I'm proud that thanks to the actions that previous governments have taken with regard to things like cat microchipping, the ivory ban, or indeed raising the maximum sentence for animal cruelty to 5 years, we are now the highest ranked G7 nation when it comes to World Animal Protection Index. But we are determined to go even further and deliver on our manifesto commitments individually during the remainder of this Parliament.
Rachel Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has said he'll lead a government of honesty, accountability and integrity. So can the Prime Minister explain how he was found to have breached the Code of Conduct, this time for failing to declare his wife's shares in a childcare agency which received a monetary boost from measures in his budget?
Mr. Speaker, if the honourable lady reads the full transcript and the full findings, she will see a detailed explanation of what happened, which the Commissioner described as a minor and inadvertent breach. But given that at the time I was not aware of the policy that was being discussed with me and corrected it later on and could have corrected it with slightly different language, she'll also know that I'm not the only person across these dispatch boxes that has had the same thing happen to them.
John Penrose.
Mr. Speaker, can I interest the Prime Minister in proposals from the Carbon Competitiveness Commission, which I chair, which would deliver net zero cheaply and without deindustrialising our economy? It would help British manufacturers facing imports from countries with lower energy costs, make our exports more competitive everywhere, and cut fuel duty here at home. We have strong backing from Britain's heavy industries, cross-party support from the excellent member from Aberavon, who I see is also on the order paper. So would the Prime Minister consider adding his name to our list of supporters as well?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend and the Commission for Carbon Competitiveness for the report that he's worked on and highlighted. The government is absolutely committed to putting in place the necessary policies for UK industry to decarbonise successfully. As he'll be aware, government recently consulted on addressing carbon leakage in particular with a range of potential options. We're in the process of considering those responses and will issue a formal response in due case.
Claire Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every year, billions of wet wipes go out into our rivers and oceans and clog up our sewers. Yep. I've been campaigning on this for years to ban plastic in wet wipes, and the government has finally promised to ban plastic in wet wipes, but that was 5 months ago and there's been nothing since then. So will the Prime Minister today finally give a date when that ban will come into force and make a difference to our environment? Or is this another broken promise from his zombie government?
Speaker, in the comprehensive plan for water that was published by the Environment Secretary in April, we did confirm our intention to ban wet wipes containing plastic, subject, of course, as is legally proper, subject to a public consultation. That consultation will be launched in the coming months in autumn of this year, and I know ministers will keep the House updated on progress.
Craig McKinley. I'd like to offer some assistance on the small boats issue. Has my right honourable friend considered the incongruity of the fact that a UK dinghy manufacturer trying to sell into the EU market would have to apply the CE marking, customs codes and the potential of being stopped and checked? And similar applies perversely when a simple thing like GB to NI trade. But none of this applies, seemingly, when these huge, supersized, dangerous, cut-and-shut dinghies are taken in from Turkey across the EU border into Bulgaria and Greece. Is he as confused as I am by the EU's double standards on this matter?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right that we must do all we can to stop the boats and tackle illegal migration. And we know that the export of small boats across parts of the European continent is a vital element of the smuggling gang's tactics. And that's why, specifically, we are stepping up joint operations with Turkey, Mr. Speaker. And I raised this with the President when we spoke, so that we can tackle organised immigration crime and specifically disrupt the supply chain of boat parts that are used for these dangerous crossings. And I will continue to keep him updated on our progress.
Luke Pollard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 years ago in Plymouth, we lost 5 people in the worst mass shooting the country has seen for a decade. The government has finally consulted on firearms reform, but after pressure from shooting groups, even these sensible measures looks like they could be watered down. So will the Prime Minister bow down to lobbyists from the shooting industry, or will he stand with the grieving families and those in Plymouth who want to see no other tragedy like this ever happen again with stronger gun laws?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know how important this issue is to the honourable gentleman following the horrific shooting in his constituency, and my thoughts are with the family of all those who were killed. He will know that firearms are subject to stringent controls, and rightly so, but those controls are kept under constant review. For example, we've taken action to improve information sharing between GPs and the police to make sure that people are not given access to firearms without their medical conditions being checked, and the statutory guidance for chief officers of police have been improving so that how people apply for firearms is assessed properly, including checks on social media. With regard to the matter that he specifically raises, the Home Office is in the process of considering responses to that consultation and will respond in due course.
Stephen Metcalfe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Later today, Mr. Speaker, I'm bringing forward a 10-minute rule bill to include the provision of automated external defibrillators in all new housing developments of 10 dwellings or more. Will my right honourable friend therefore support this provision and ask his relevant cabinet colleagues to engage with me on to ensure these life-saving pieces of equipment can become commonplace where they can have the most impact close to people's homes?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is right to highlight the importance of these life-saving devices, and that's why the National Planning Policy Framework already expects planning policies and decisions to promote public safety, but it's also why recently the government launched a £1 million fund which will place around 1,000 new defibrillators in communities across England to help improve equality of access to these life-saving devices.
Andy MacDonald.
In 2019, Outwood Academy's Riverside Free School application in Middlesbrough was approved, with its first Year 7 intake arriving the following year. And that has happened every year since, but there's still no new building. I've had no response to my request for a meeting with the Secretary of State, but that original intake are destined to spend their entire secondary education in various temporary adapted premises. Mr. Speaker, with pupils being shunted around old buildings, talk of levelling up and addressing the GCSE attainment gap rings hollow. So can the Prime Minister and his Education Secretary get off their derrieres and sort this out?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to ensure that the honourable gentleman gets an answer to the specific question he raised on the school. But more generally, I'm proud of what the government's doing in Teesside and the Tees Valley to support education, with the recent announcement of new sixth forms, but also as an education improvement area, receiving extra funding and resources. And that's why we've seen standards in reading and maths increase considerably, and we're determined to keep going.
Priti Patel.
Because the Prime Minister is aware of how the RAC issue
has really affected schools in Essex. We've got a high number of schools that have been impacted, and he's rightly said today that the government is doing everything it can to get children back to school. Can he try to commit, and I know there's a debate later on today, to fully funding both the capital and revenue costs that are associated with getting children back into school? And I would hope that he would commit to meeting the leader of Essex County Council, because they are pioneering some great reforms right now where they're looking to support, maintain schools as well as academy trusts. And I think actually the government could get some good insights in terms of how we can get children back to school fast, and also look at the funding model for this.
Can I first of all start by thanking my right honourable friend for the engagement constructively that she's had with the department, and indeed pay tribute to her school leaders and local authority for everything that they are doing. I am happy to give her the reassurance, as the Chancellor already said, new funding will be provided to schools to deal with this issue, but also to ensure that we can get through this as quickly as possible for her constituents and parents, and indeed everyone's. DFE are in the process of increasing the number of dedicated caseworkers from 50 to 80. We have 35 project directors regionally on the ground to support, and we've increased the number of survey firms by more than double, Mr. Speaker, so that we can rapidly, over the next few weeks, fully assess all the relevant schools and have a mitigation plan in place.
Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Steelworkers in my Aberafon constituency have watched in frustration as other governments have pumped investment into decarbonisation, whilst successive Tory governments have sat on their hands. So when will the Prime Minister finally conclude the talks with Tata Steel, and can he guarantee that there will be a matching level of investment with what other European governments are doing on decarbonisation? And will he guarantee that the conclusion will be based on serious engagement comprehensively with the steel unions?
Well, Mr. Speaker, steel is absolutely vital to the UK. This is something that, of course, is of interest to the honourable gentleman, but something that I've also discussed extensively with my honourable friend from Scunthorpe, and that's because the industry supports local jobs and economic growth. Now, conversations with specific companies like Tata are ongoing, but they are understandably commercially sensitive. But we do share the ambition of securing a decarbonised, sustainable and competitive future for the industry in this country. And in the meantime, we are supporting the sector, Mr. Speaker, with our energy industries exemption, which provides discounted energy bills, and the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund, which supports steel companies with their energy bills and the transition through capital to a greener future.
Mark Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 weeks ago, the government announced that the Bolsover School's bid for a sixth form in my constituency has been successful. 52% of school leavers at 16 years old across the country go on to a sixth form, but in Bolsover it's 23%, in Clown 22%, and in Shirebrook it's 7%. So will the Prime Minister join me in thanking the Redhill Academy Trust, Matthew Hall, the head teacher of Bolsover School, and all of those who have helped to bring a sixth form to Bolsover?
Well, can I congratulate Redhill and everyone involved with the successful bid for the new sixth form in Bolsover. I'm delighted that the bid was successful, because my honourable friend, I know, shares my desire to ensure a world-class education for every single one of our young people across the country, because that is the best way to provide them with the opportunity for a better life, and this new programme of sixth forms will deliver that in his constituency and many others across the nation.
Ian Mans.
Very grateful, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the North East has been underfunded in terms of transport investment for decades. HS2, meant to be an economic development and connectivity lifeline, now not coming anywhere near. And the A1 Northumberland dualling decision delayed yet again, and our regional rail services still running on outdated infrastructure and rolling stock. With all that in mind, will the Prime Minister commit to funding to reopen the Leamside line from Gateshead to County Durham to take pressure off the East Coast Main Line and aid economic well-being movement of passengers and freight services in the North East of England, or is levelling up just a rhetoric?
Well, Mr. Speaker, what I would say to the honourable gentleman, obviously it wouldn't be right for me to comment on specific projects, but to give him a sense of our commitment, what I can tell him is that in real terms, since 2010, we have spent over a third more in central capital investment in northern transport every single year since 2010 compared to Labour's last 6 years in government, Mr. Speaker. That's what we're doing for northern transportation, and specifically when it comes to reopening and restoring railway lines, where was the first one we did? From Ashington to Blythe.
Limrag. Yeah, I have a cheerful question that I know my right honourable friend the Prime Minister will find impossible to resist, because he'll be aware of the work I've been doing with the Number 10's UK Ambassador for Mental Health, Dr Alex George, to establish early intervention mental health hubs across the country. Now, we've got the pilot, which seems lost somewhere between the Treasury and the Department of Health, but I know he'll sort that problem out. But I wonder if he will be able to meet with Dr Alex George and myself to discuss it further, because these hubs will make a massive difference to constituencies across the country, because we all know the problems with CAMS and the perverse situation where children and young people have to get progressively worse before they get the treatment they need. I know he'll be very supportive of this one, Mr. Speaker.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know my honourable friend is rightly a passionate advocate for improving mental health support for young people, something that I know we are doing, and I'm proud of our record, particularly increasing the number of mental health support teams that work with schools and expanding community services. I know DHSE is looking at the role that early support hubs might play in this plan, but I'm very happy to meet my honourable friend personally to discuss how we can push this through.
Mary Glynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've heard far too much lately about ministerial posteriors and very little about prosperity for the country, even in these dying days of the lame duck government. Will the Prime Minister stop prevaricating and subscribe to the Horizon programme for the sake of vital British science, innovation and cancer research?
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is a government that is investing record sums in British science and research and development, because we believe that is critical to a brighter economic future and spreading opportunity. Now, our priority and preference is to associate to Horizon, but we do want to make sure that that is on terms that are right, both for the British taxpayer and for British science and research. I can commit to her that we've been extensively involved in discussions. I hope to be able to conclude those successfully, and when we do, I hope she'll be the first to stand up and congratulate the government.
Caroline Dinage.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, but it also marks 2 years since the death of my constituent Sophie Farrell. She was only 10 years old. Every day in the UK, Mr. Speaker, 10 young people will be diagnosed with cancer, and 2 of those will not survive. Those that do face a lifetime of side effects from treatments that are just not designed for small bodies. When will the Prime Minister publish a childhood cancer action plan?
Oh, Mr. Speaker, can I thank my honourable friend for raising this issue and extend my sympathies to her constituent's family as she raised. She's right to continue campaigning in this important area. I hope she'll understand that I can't preempt the content specifically of the strategy, but I can tell her that it will draw on previous work, including submissions from childhood cancer charities and stakeholders to our recent calls for evidence. Of course, we want to hear from them to highlight and get a sense of the issues that she specifically raised, but I'm sure I'll ensure that we write to her to give her a sense of timing.
Chris Law.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every year, the SNP Scottish Government mitigates against the cruelest of Westminster policies by spending £84 million supporting hard-working families against the brutal bedroom tax and over £6.2 million covering the 2-child benefit cap. Astonishingly, Mr. Speaker, we have learned over the summer the Leader of the Opposition is an enthusiastic supporter of these Tory cruel welfare policies, with U-turn after U-turn from the Labour Party. So given that the Tories and Labour are two cheeks of the same arse, offering no change, no vision, no hope, does the Prime Minister agree that the only way Scottish voters can rid themselves of these...
Order. I'm not going to both stand up, so one of us is going to give way and it won't be me. Can I just say, let's think about language. Let's be more temperate and let's make sure that this Parliament can be proud. The pride of this Parliament will shine through, but certainly not using language.
Happy to change the offending word with bottom. Given that the Tories and Labour are two cheeks of the same bottom, offering no change, no vision and no hope, does the Prime Minister agree that the only way for Scottish voters to rid themselves of these heinous policies is to vote SNP to leave Westminster forever?
Mr. Speaker, obviously not. But I think the thrust of that question was directed at the Leader of the Opposition rather than me. I won't want to get in the middle of that. But what I can say is we want to ensure a welfare system that is compassionate and looks after the most vulnerable in our society, while supporting those who can into work to do so, because that's also fair for everyone else and British taxpayers. I believe that is a system that we are achieving, Mr. Speaker. And right now we're providing thousands of pounds of support to help with energy bills and everything else to people in Scotland, and we will continue to do so.
That completes Prime Minister's questions. I'll just sit down.
So there we have the first PMQs for 7 weeks, and as the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, reflected, people were excited to be back at school. However, we had the information just before PMQs kicked off that some schools aren't back because of the 104 schools affected by the concrete crisis. 19, we're being told, will have the start of term delayed, 4 having to use fully remote learning. So that set the scene for a pretty feisty common session.
What did our guests think? We are joined in the studio by Labour MP for Birmingham, Perry Barr, Khalid Mahmood, and Conservative MP for Witney and West Oxfordshire, Robert Courts. Khalid, can we just start with you first of all? The tactic that Keir Starmer seemed to be using to try to show the depths of this crisis was listing the schools affected, naming them.
Yes.
Do you think that worked?
Oh, it did, and that's absolutely right, because it's the people that are affected, the children that are affected in those particular constituencies and those areas, and it's right to point that out. This is not an abstract issue. It actually affects people, and particularly young people's education in those areas.
Yeah, it was Labour's list, of course, that he brought up. He had earlier declined to actually reveal to reporters what Labour would do to actually address the crisis in terms of spending or how they would organise it. But I just wonder about Rishi Sunak's response. Politics of opportunism from Captain Hindsight, the echoes of Johnsonism. Did that really work in terms of the position to take?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a Keir Starmer perspective, I think this is one of his less effective appearances. I don't think that listing of 6 schools really took us very far.
A bit dull.
He had one point and he made it 6 times. And the problem is that it disintegrates as soon as you start looking at the detail, because Labour's position isn't as strong as he thinks it is. And the Conservatives' position and this government's action is actually very good. Now, Rishi, you see him very much at his best.
Just to pick you up on that, you said Conservative position actually very good in how they've handled this. Why are you so convinced of that?
I'll come to that in a sec, if I may. But what you see the Prime Minister at his very best at is when he starts unpacking detail, and that's what you really saw there. So to answer that question, what you see in terms of the education record that you've seen under this government is an excellent record with things like phonics. So you have one of the best reading records in any developed country that you see here. You see more children in good or outstanding schools than ever before. You have, in terms of budget, you have the very high levels of per pupil funding. That's now the highest levels that you've seen on record. You've heard the Prime Minister unpack this real detail of actual action that he's taken, including increasing the maintenance budget by 20%.
All that is being overshadowed now by children at the start of the summer, the autumn term, not able to go to school to learn.
Oh, and I don't disagree at all on that. This has got to be fixed, and those are the things that really matter. Which are the schools affected and what is being done to fix it? But that is where you have a strong record of action. Because, as we discussed just before PMQs, this has been around for a while. This is something that was being looked at in the 90s.
In fact, he related back to 1994, so perhaps he's Captain Hindsight in terms of looking back at that. But let's pick up on how Starmer addressed this.
Just that it's action that's being fixed. What we've done is monitored, looked for the problem, found the problem.
Come on, there may be quite a lot of parents and head teachers out there wondering if that's the case.
Well,
and certainly
Starmer
said he doesn't get it's all fine out there. I mean, that maybe will chime with a lot of people.
But that's the key thing, is that he doesn't understand the ordinary person who has to go to work, who has to take their children to school, and what disturbances that would cause for those parents who are having to work and also look at their children. And those are the real issues. I think in terms of what he's saying about the figures that he's put in, if you look at the moment, the highest numbers we've ever had in terms of children not attending school. And that's a real issue as well that he needs to bring. If he wants to talk about detail, let's talk about those details. That children that are not attending school, but also children living with no qualifications, all need children as well.
Right.
So we need to look at that.
Can I just ask about the timing of this list? Literally minutes before PMQs. kicked off. Suddenly the list was available. I mean, that's, you know, really a bit naughty, isn't it, when a lot of people were asking, please give us these names.
It's difficult for me to comment as to why they chose that timing to release it.
Complete coincidence, maybe?
But clearly, they've been going through a process of understanding which schools are affected, and I think they would take the view that as soon as they know, they tell people, and I think that is the right thing to do.
Well, and how do you feel about the fact that 19, we're being told, have had to delay the start of term for them using fully remote learning? Is that something that the government should crow about?
Well, clearly, this has got to be fixed. This is not good. It's not good for parents. It's not good for children. I'm not pretending it is OK. It isn't. We know what that problem is. We know the ones that are identified, but remedial measures are being put in place. It's got to be fixed, and that's what the government said it's doing, and it says the money will be there to do.
Right, OK.
Let's bring in our political editor, Christopher Hope, who is at Westminster. Good afternoon to you, Christopher. What did you make of that start of term clash then? Interestingly, actually, Gillian Keegan, she wasn't next to the Prime Minister. I don't think we barely saw her. She was way down the row.
Detention, maybe.
Yeah. But normally they do try and choreograph that so Ms Keegan will be next to the PM to show support. Certainly that happened when Suella Braverman was under some pressure late last year. But I thought that Rishi Sunak came out of it quite well. I thought that the lines from Keir Starmer, he said that the cowboy builders have been involved in these schools. The difference is the cowboy ministers are running the country. That was a good hit. He also talked about the £30 million spent of our money on the DFE, the Department of Education offices, when schools haven't got money to fix their roofs. But I thought the response from Mr Sunak was really, really strong, actually. 1% affected. He said that the Labour's building schools of the future, which is now seen as a panacea for all of these issues. In fact, at the time, the NAO, the Independent National Audit Office, said then that it excluded 80% of schools. A third of them were more expensive than they needed to be. And don't forget, the Tories came in to power when there's no money left. So I think he gave some context, I think, to the attacks on the government over the past 3 or 4 days. I wonder why those attack lines that were used to good effect in the chamber were not given to Gillian Keegan.
And certainly the attack lines worked well with the Tory backbenchers. You know, they were in good voice. But I wonder if he's reading the room in terms of the rest of the country when we, you know, Captain Hindsight back on the bridge, accusing Starmer of political opportunism. You know, that might not chime with a lot of mums and dads and head teachers out there trying to cope with the problem.
Definitely. And you asked about timing, Mark. That list has been put out just before PMQs. They were trying to wait till they can get to all parents and all schools affected. Not all schools are back at term time, so some parents need to be contacted through phones and emails by the schools themselves. That's what happened there. That's the timing. And of course, there's an opposition day debate today when the Labour Party will try and get a vote on whether any communication between the DFE, the Department for Education and the Treasury about why that budget was cut 2 years ago when the PM was Chancellor. So I think that was trying to sort of see off that challenge. But I think maybe Labour may have felt the government's on the rack here. We don't need to go too hard. We'll trot out the same attack lines as we've been using for the past 3 days. I think it didn't work, actually.
Yeah, caught between a rack and a hard place, as a lot of the sort of headline writers are still going with. But, I mean, how much legs politically do you think is left in this?
There's quite a lot. I mean, Mr Sunak said that each school takes a few days to cover, but the NHS is saying they won't get their self sorted out until 2030. And long-term, not short-term measures might take much longer. I think it's now front and centre, I think, of the political agenda for the next few months, Mark.
OK, Chris, thank you for that.
Well, still in the studio, we have Labour MP for Birmingham, Perry Barr, Khalid Mahmood, and Conservative MP for Witney and West Oxfordshire, Robert Courts. And Mark mentioned there about how many legs are left in this story, how much mileage. I guess part of it, Khalid, is how many other public buildings might be discovered to have this dodgy concrete. I mean, Houses of Parliament being inspected. There's a suggestion.
I mean, the Houses of Parliament were built quite some time ago, so that's OK. But in terms of
modern additions,
additions would be needed to be looked at. But hospitals and other public buildings, local authority buildings, health buildings outside of hospitals and stuff, and so those sort of buildings would certainly come into this, and we'll have to look at this very, very seriously.
Suggestions that, you know, the starting gun now on a general election campaign. We've got by-elections as well. Does this mean the government's had to start that process on the back foot?
Well, this is clearly a big issue that's got to be dealt with at the beginning of term. I mean, I think that you've got a long way to run in terms of an election campaign because we've still got to hear a great deal from...
You think you're going to go long rather than short in terms of the time?
I have no inside information on this. I would have thought it would...
There must be discussions going on about, you know...
Above my pay grade.
What would you like? Would you like them to, you know, wait until maybe inflation comes down a little bit and you can sell the story a bit better on the doorsteps?
As far as I'm concerned, I'll be out standing on the record that I have locally, and so I'm happy to face...
Which was David Cameron's constituency, we remember.
It was, yes.
Lovely part of the world. Do you think the Education Secretary's days are numbered? In light of, I mean, she's had a bit of a torrid week, hasn't she?
She's had a difficult week. I mean, clearly having this sort of story at the beginning of term is going to be very challenging for any minister. What people will be looking for from the point of view of MPs, as much as journalists, as much as the public, is whether this is fixed. And that's what's got to happen. This is
and how quickly?
How quickly it's fixed, how effectively.
And talking of things being fixed, there was one question on the situation in Birmingham. You are a Birmingham MP. Clearly, it is rather unfortunate for Labour, where they've got this, world-standing local authority, and suddenly they say, help us out, we're bust. It's not a good look, is it, for Labour?
No, it's not. And I say again, over the last 10 years, £1 billion of cuts in Birmingham have taken their toll, and providing other services, they've done that clearly. We've had the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham.
Well, and already, should that have taken place? Was there money actually put into that should have just, been sidelined to keep
I don't think
the
there was any
going?
Most of the money came from the government and from the private sector predominantly, and including the new 1,000 houses that we've got in my constituencies, which is part of that. Which is
the athletes' homes at the time.
Which is the athletes' home at the time. So I think there is an issue that we gained in terms of what Birmingham has done. We need to now get those people into those houses in Birmingham, which we're trying to do, and so we need to move forward. But I think the £1 billion that has been taken out is now paying effect. And this is just Birmingham is the tip of the iceberg. Majority of the local authorities, whether they're Conservatives, Labour or anything else, are suffering these cost crises because of the cuts over the last 13 years by this government to services in local government.
I mean, there is a worry that people in Birmingham could see their council tax bills rising by some 10%.
Well, there's a commitment at the moment by the Labour Party locally that there will not be a rise on the council tax, but what we've got to look is how we can actually work together and ensure better services are provided under these terms.
And I suspect a Tory government won't be in a rush to bail them out.
Well, as a governmental perspective, we'll of course do the right thing for residents. That's what we'll always try and do, the right thing for the people that we serve, which is the right way to look at it. But I do think this is a critically important point. I mean, Khalid's saying, this is all about cuts. But, the problem is that Labour never grasped the fact that there is not a bottomless pit of money. You have to be given a budget, you have to manage it effectively, you have to spend it well, and you have to prioritise, and they just can't do it.
There were some Tory-run councils, though, weren't there, that also ran into trouble?
Yes, they are.
Not just Labour.
Nothing like in this spectacular scale. I mean,
it's because it's much bigger council and the largest council across Europe, and we've had Tory issues.
Anyway, last thought, are you excited to be back at school?
Very excited to be back. I think spent all summer in the constituency, didn't go anywhere else, and I think fantastic to be back up and running.
Do you share that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive privilege to do this job and to serve people. So to be back and to take the issues we picked up over the summer and to come back raring with energy to make change for people is an absolute privilege. So, yeah, I'm glad to be back.
We'll ask you again in a couple of weeks.
Sounds like you got a bit bored by those long summer holidays.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for coming in, and more political reaction coming up. Stay with us here on GB News.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Widely sunny and hot once again for the rest of the day. Warm overnight, but the risk of some thunderstorms developing overnight as well. We've got low pressure swirling around to the southwest, and around that, as well as a southerly airflow, we've got the potential for some instability to be released across western parts of the UK. So some thunderstorms, some frequent lightning, some heavy rainfall. Much of this affecting Irish sea coasts through the evening and overnight, although one or two could pop up for the West Midlands into the Manchester area by dawn. Elsewhere, it's largely dry, clear spells, but a warm night. Temperatures staying widely up at high teens, perhaps even the low 20s. And we've got some low cloud and some mistiness creeping into the central belt, eastern parts of England and Scotland by dawn. Much of that retreats back to the beaches by the afternoon, and then it's sunny skies for the vast majority. However, still the potential for some thunderstorms and some frequent lightning, especially around western coasts. Temperatures higher compared with Wednesday. Fairly widely, we're looking at the mid to high 20s, 32 Celsius possible in the southeast. And then into Friday, we've still got some of this low cloud around eastern coasts, and that will tend to retreat back towards the coast by the daytime. Sunny skies for many on Friday and into Saturday. Temperatures rising further, 33 or even 34 Celsius in places.
That warm feeling inside. From boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
This September, the GB News family is back together. From breakfast, right across the day, breaking the latest stories, and every evening. And don't forget the weekend. We've got the whole of the UK covered. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country, with fun, lively and intelligent conversation with the biggest guests. This September, we'll meet Chris and John. Thank you for choosing GB News. We're proud to be Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock. You're watching the Live Desk here on GB News. And coming up this Wednesday lunchtime.
A fiery first exchange of the season between Sunak and Starmer, dominated by the crumbling concrete crisis. The Labour leader claiming the country is now run by cowboys.
Just moments before the Prime Minister got to his feet, the long-awaited list of schools suddenly published, 19 having to delay the start of term.
Is it bearable? The hottest day of the year so far, with a September scorcher of 32 Celsius, as London Zoo splashes out for its coolest customers.
And the air traffic control system failure, a 1 in 15 million event, but it comes as a report's released today trying to answer the questions being posed by all those disgruntled travellers.
And we'll be bringing you some satisfaction. It's only rock and roll, but the Rolling Stones are back. We'll be bringing you details of their first album for 7 years. They're going to be live from Hackney. How exciting!
Will they all fit in?
First, here's your latest headlines with Rhiannon.
Good afternoon. It's coming up to 2 minutes past 1. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has defended his funding decisions on schools whilst he was Chancellor in the wake of the crumbling concrete crisis. He was responding to questions from the Labour leader, who'd earlier visited one of more than 100 schools which have been ordered to fully or partially shut down. During the first PMQs after the summer recess, Sir Keir Starmer blamed the scale of the problem on Conservative government failures.
This crisis is the inevitable result of 13 years of cutting corners, botched jobs, sticking plaster politics. It's the sort of thing you expect from cowboy builders, saying that everyone else is wrong, everyone else is to blame, protesting they've done an effing good job, even as the ceiling falls in. The difference, Mr. Speaker, is that in this case, the cowboys are running the country.
Well, the Prime Minister says the government acted decisively in the face of new information.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is exactly the kind of political opportunism that we've come to expect from Captain Hindsight over here. Before today, he's never once raised this issue with me across this dispatch box.
Well, just before PMQs began, the government published the long-awaited list of affected schools. 147 were named. The list also shows the 19 schools which have had their start of term delayed as a result of the collapse-prone concrete. The list also reveals pupils at 24 schools across England will receive some remote learning and 4 will switch to full remote learning. And you can see the full list of schools affected on our website, gbnews.com. The glitch, which affected hundreds of flights last week, is said to have been caused by an extremely rare set of circumstances. The National Air Traffic Services boss says the system failed to process a flight plan properly, and the odds of that happening were 1 in 15 million. Around 250,000 people were affected over the bank holiday weekend, with more than a quarter of flights cancelled on the Monday. The UK Civil Aviation Authority is launching an independent review. NAT's Chief Executive Martin Rolfe says steps have been taken to ensure it doesn't happen again.
We had a flight plan, the information that comes with a flight, that was unique amongst the 15 million that we've received over the last 5 years. The system took that flight plan, and when it realised just how unusual it was, it couldn't process it in the way that it would normally do so, and decided the safest option was to put itself into a fail-safe mode, if you like.
The final words of the helicopter pilot involved in the crash in Leicester 5 years ago have now been published in a report. Everyone on board, including the Leicester City Football Club owner, was killed when the aircraft hit the ground, bursting into flames outside the stadium. As the helicopter spun out of control, Eric Swaffer could be heard saying, "I've no idea what's going on." Investigators found the pedals became disconnected from the tail rotor, causing it to lose control. Russian mercenary group Wagner is set to be declared a terrorist organisation by the UK. Once it passes in Parliament, it means it'll be illegal to be a member or support the group. The draft order will also allow assets to be categorised as terrorist property and seized. Certain prescription offences can be punishable by up to 14 years in prison. A brand new science facility will be expanded and upgraded after being granted a £500 million funding boost by the government. Diamond Light Source in Harwell in Oxfordshire has advanced the COVID vaccine as well as treatments of HIV and cancer. The upgrade will take 7 years. The Science Secretary, Michelle Donnellan, says it's a worthy investment.
Highly focused light technology so that we can actually better understand the structures of proteins and molecules. And what that really means is it means that we can advance our technology in terms of production of vaccines, in terms of production of cancer treatments, in terms of malaria treatments, so drug technology.
And parts of the UK are already feeling the effects of a heat wave, with the hottest day of the year expected this week. Temperatures in Britain could soar as high as 32 degrees Celsius, 4 degrees higher than Ibiza. The UK Health Security Agency has upgraded its heat alert to amber. The warning covers every region of England apart from the northeast, where a yellow alert is in place. They'll all be in force until Sunday. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Mark and Pip.
Rhiannon, thanks very much indeed, and welcome back to the live desk, where apparently the country is being run by cowboys, well, at least according to the leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, clashing with the Prime Minister at PMQs over the concrete crumbling crisis. Rishi Sunak, though, insisting the government had reacted swiftly in response to new evidence.
Yeah, it was quite a lively start to the start of term. Moments before the Prime Minister got to his feet, the government published a list of schools, finally, affected by the RAC crisis. It revealed that 19 had delayed the start of term, 4 have switched to online learning, 20 are employing a mix of in-school and at-home learning, meaning a total of 43 schools across England are affected.
Well, let's speak now to our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who's at Westminster for us, to maybe mark the homework of the head boy, Catherine, because I gather there's been a point of order raised about an assertion the Prime Minister made when he said that Keir Starmer's wasn't even worthy of a single mention in his so-called landmark speech on education this summer. If we'd listened to him, our kids would have been off school and locked down for longer. Apparently, he had mentioned it in that speech.
Yes, indeed he had. When Rishi Sunak said this, there were huge cheers from his backbenchers. But Lucy Powell from Labour pointed out that, yes, indeed, crumbling schools had been mentioned by Keir Starmer during the speech. The evidence has been provided. Now, the Speaker has accepted that and said that the record has been corrected. But the original suggestion was that, the Prime Minister was found guilty of misleading the House. And certainly Keir Starmer, both of them back from their summer break, used every single one of his 6 questions on this concrete crisis in schools, because Labour believe that this is absolutely politically toxic. The fact that school children going back, not all of them are going back. We've got this list of schools now that are affected. We know that 19 haven't been able to start back as they should. We know that 4 of them are going to have remote learning. But bear in mind, there's still well over 1,000 questionnaires outstanding. So that number of schools is likely to go up quite considerably.
Oh, what a shame. We will try and return to Catherine Forster. This line about whether Sunak was what Sunak said about Starmer. Number 10 is sticking to its guns and saying that the Starmer speech did not mention RAC in July.
Yeah, however,
so
clearly...
moving on again.
Clearly, the issue is that the schools were known about, according to Labour. I think we can speak to Catherine once more. We've re-established communications because there's something else in the offing, Catherine, we understand, which is a parliamentary device known as a humble address, where Labour may try and get the documents that Rishi Sunak was looking at when he made his decision on 2020-21 in terms of cutting the school's budget.
Yes, that's right. Labour were calling for a list of the schools to be published. That's come out in the last hour, but they want much more information now. They've got an opposition day debate. They're going to use what you say is a humble address to try to force the government to publish documents about the communications between the Treasury, where current Prime Minister, then Chancellor Rishi Sunak, was in charge, and the Department for Education. The communications where the Department for Education asked for funding for 200 schools per year to be refurbished or rebuilt, and Rishi Sunak apparently only gave funding for 50. They want to see what warnings were given to him, what his response was. So going on in the Commons this afternoon, this row is going to rumble on. I suspect it's only beginning. First of all, of course, we don't know the final number of schools. There's lots that have still not sent back the questionnaire. There's the other countries as well. We've got an idea that there's 33 affected schools in Scotland, but of course it's not just schools, is it? Because now it's been broadened out. The NHS England have written now to hospitals asking for urgent reviews. The National Audit Office knows that there's 41 hospitals with RAC, and that's 7 throughout. That was already known. They're currently due to be rebuilt in the next 7 or so years, but we don't know, of course, that may now come forward. Also things like prisons, things like courts, even this place behind me, the Houses of Parliament itself, they are now investigating to see if this form of aerated concrete is present there as well.
Finally, Catherine, I just wanted to ask whether you think it was significant that the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, was not sitting next to the Prime Minister, her boss, during PMQs. Was she on the naughty step?
You would wonder, wouldn't you? Because normally if a minister's in trouble, it's a way of demonstrating that you've got faith in them to put them right next to the Prime Minister. From where I was sitting in the press gallery, I couldn't even see Gillian Keegan. I wondered for a moment if she was even there. So read into that what you will. But certainly there's plenty of people in government not too happy with the Department of Education and with Gillian Keegan in particular, because of the way that this has been handled. This happened all very suddenly. As we've seen, it's going to have monumental knock-on effects. And her sort of comments, the hot mic comments the other day, saying, does anybody thank me for doing a good job? I think most people would think, it is the Education Secretary's job to be all over everything related to schools. We're only at the beginning of this crisis. To be sort of asking for thanks would seem a bit rich, I suspect, to most people. So I suspect people are not terribly happy with Gillian Keegan at the moment. There are rumours that her position is in danger. But in some ways, I think it suits Rishi Sunak because obviously there's lots of questions about decisions he made while Gillian Keegan is there to blame. In some ways, that's quite convenient for Rishi Sunak.
In detention, quite so. Catherine, at Westminster, for the moment, thank you for that. That's the politics. What about the schools and the education? Let's catch up with Ellie Costello, our national reporter, who's at Roding Valley High School in Essex. And as we've been reflecting, Ellie, of course, Essex, I think, probably the worst affected county in terms of the buildings.
Yes, good afternoon to you both. Essex is the worst affected county in terms of this RAC crisis. A third of the schools in the list are in this county alone. That list published in the last hour or so, 147 in that list. 19 of them had to delay the start of term. That included Buckhurst Hill Community Primary School, where I spoke to you from yesterday. 4 of them have had to move completely online, teaching all of their students online, and the rest of them have got a mix of online learning and face-to-face learning. And one of those schools is where I'm stood now, which is Roding Valley High School here in Essex. And you might be able to make out the building just behind that sign behind me, and that is a building which has maths, art and IT classrooms in it. That building has RAC in the roof. That building is now out of bounds, which has led to a lot of disruption here at this school. They're only welcoming back years 7 and 12 today, so about 300 to 400 students here, and which would usually be a school of 2,000. So it is really heavily disrupted. I have just had this statement from Roding Valley High School, so I'm going to share a little bit of that with you now, which says that parents and carers were informed on Friday about these temporary measures to ensure that all students can access their education at the start of the academic year. It goes on to say that critical year groups, including years 7, 11 and 13, and students with special educational needs will start at school as normal from next Monday, the 11th of September. But other year groups are operating a rota style of on-site and home learning. And it goes on to talk about the issue of food, because we touched upon that yesterday, didn't we, with the primary school. I was at Buckhurst Hill Community Primary School, and those students in receipt of free school meals are going to be provided with packed lunch equivalents, similar to what we heard yesterday. Obviously, that's a great concern to parents and head teachers, those students who are vulnerable and relying on free school meals. And it goes on to say that the school staff are devastated not to be able to welcome the students to the school at the start of term, but they are working really hard to secure demountable facilities to temporarily replace the closed building behind us. They want every student to return to site. And I did actually speak to the head teacher a little bit earlier on, Mark and Pip. He said he was too busy to talk to us on camera. As you can imagine, it's very hectic inside. He said he found out on Thursday. He's new to this role himself. He described it as a massive headache, and he was told that the building was totally unsafe last Thursday as surveyors made their way in. He was very, very concerned because staff laptops, textbooks, everything like that was obviously inside the building, and he was very, very concerned that if it was a switch to complete remote learning, they wouldn't have the tools to actually be able to carry that out. So a relief in a sense that pupils have been welcomed back here, but it is that mix of in-person and remote learning, and it is going to be a lot of disruption for pupils and for teachers.
And what about the impact on those students, Ellie? I mean, I'm sure there is a few who will be quite pleased to be off school and enjoying the sunshine, but the majority of them will be frustrated they can't get back in.
I mean, what a week to be learning from home in this lovely, lovely weather. I'm sure many students will be taking advantage of that and enjoying their lessons out in the garden this week. But the serious side of this is going back to school, and especially starting at school in year 7, is a really anxious time for so many. And I've been stood on this street since about 7 o'clock this morning, and we saw lots of tiny little year 7s making their way into secondary school for the first time, many holding the hands of their parents, looking very, very nervous. And that building having rack in its roof will only add to those anxieties. And I was talking to a mum at the school gate this morning who said she's not even going into detail about the rack in this school with her daughter because she doesn't want to make her any more nervous than she already is. But earlier I spoke to year 13 student Ruby, who told me that she is feeling really nervous as well.
So we were told a couple of days ago, the parents received a letter home. I've seen the letter, just sort of explaining that there was going to be arrangements for how the year groups were going to be brought back into school. Well, I'm quite lucky because my subjects are away from the building, which has the concrete in it. So it doesn't affect me so much. I am nervous. I am definitely nervous. I mean, year 13 is a nerve-wracking year, and I'm already afraid about it, and how it's going to go, and how much more content we're going to have to learn. I mean, I've got no idea how long it's going to take. I didn't know anything about it before all of this has come out, so I'm just hoping that it's going to be sorted as soon as possible and have as little impact on my education as possible.
And those concerns for mental health are being echoed up and down the country, Mark and Pip. There was a head teacher in Essex, James Saunders, who spoke about his students who are going to have to work semi-remotely for the next term. He's very concerned about the knock-on impact on their mental health, especially those starting secondary school in year 7. And of course, the concern now is that this issue is not just isolated to schools. Already, hospitals, 7 of those have either been partially or completely constructed using racks so far in the country. There's concern there's going to be many more hospitals affected. And the Defence Minister, Grant Shapps, speaking this morning to Eamon and Isabel, saying that his government buildings at the Ministry of Defence are indeed being looked at for RAC as well. So concerns already that this is going to be a much wider crisis that's affecting much more than just schools.
Indeed, it ain't over yet. Ellie, thank you very much for taking us through all that there at Roding in Essex. More, of course, as we get it. Now, something we don't say that often here on GB News. Coming up, the Rolling Stones, live from Hackney. Let's rock.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, it's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Widely sunny and hot once again for the rest of the day. Warm overnight, but the risk of some thunderstorms developing overnight as well. We've got low pressure swirling around to the southwest, and around that, as well as a southerly airflow, we've got the potential for some instability to be released across western parts of the UK. So some thunderstorms, some frequent lightning, some heavy rainfall. Much of this affecting Irish sea coasts through the evening and overnight, although one or two could pop up for the West Midlands into the Manchester area by dawn. Elsewhere, it's largely dry, clear spells, but a warm night. Temperatures staying widely up at high teens, perhaps even the low 20s. And we've got some low cloud and some mistiness creeping into the central belt, eastern parts of England and Scotland by dawn. Much of that retreats back to the beaches by the afternoon, and then it's sunny skies for the vast majority. However, still the potential for some thunderstorms and some frequent lightning, especially around western coasts. Temperatures higher compared with Wednesday, fairly widely. We're looking at the mid to high 20s, 32 Celsius possible in the southeast. And then into Friday, we've still got some of this low cloud around eastern coasts, and that will tend to retreat back towards the coast by the daytime. Sunny skies for many on Friday and into Saturday. Temperatures rising further, 33 or even 34 Celsius in places.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Are you going to say it or am I going to say it?
You say it.
You can't always get what you want, but you can today because we're going to go live to Hackney because that logo might tell you in the next hour we're going to see the remaining members of the Rolling Stones to announce their first studio album in some 7 years, the first original music they released in 18 years, would you believe?
And lots of you Rolling Stones fans knew something was afoot because they took out a very innocent looking advert, and I think it was the local newspaper, the Hackney Gazette. So they've been teasing it, they've had this campaign going, and what you saw was this instantly recognisable tongue logo as well, projected onto structures in New York, Los Angeles, London, Paris. And now, in the next few minutes, the 3 remaining members of the Rolling Stones will be announcing their new album called...
Well, we think it's Hackney Diamonds. And the T said, welcome to Hackney Diamonds, specialist in glass repair. Don't get angry, get it fixed. Opening early September, Mare Street E8, which is where we are now. I don't know whether that's going to be the song title, Don't Get Angry, Get It Fixed. But 2:30, we think it'll actually kick off with, I think, an interview with Jimmy Fallon, who is the American US talk show host. So they're going big, going bold, but the crowd already there in the audience.
And it's going to be, well, a real global moment. And we have it on good authority that one of the tracks on the album will feature 2 members of the Beatles, Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr. So this is very, very exciting indeed if you're a Stones fan.
Yeah, which is turning the clock back because, of course, I think they provided this song in '63 for the Stones to record. But Sir Paul McCartney certainly reflecting on the sad loss of Charlie Watts, their drummer, who won't be with them, of course. This is the first time that they will have gone public without Charlie. And I think Steve Jordan, who's probably going to be on drums in terms of their tour, which we suspect will follow. But a bit of rock and roll history for you coming up shortly.
Mark will be digging out his Rolling Stones T-shirt.
Which I still have, yes, from Earl's Court 1975. That'll age me. Now, urgent talks taking place at Birmingham City Council. The government, union chiefs and residents all wanting to know the fallout from, well, effectively the council going bust.
The council declared itself bankrupt after being hit with a £760 million bill and confirmed that all new spending, with the exception of statutory services, must stop immediately.
Well, the council leader is insisting vital services will be protected. But, of course, how will the other provisions and residents be affected? Let's get more with our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson joining us live from Birmingham. Because the other issue, Jack, when you've been reporting on this for us before, is that they've got the debt figure, but it's still going up by the week by millions.
Yeah, that's right. So obviously a few months ago it was £760 million that had been found, this black hole in the finances of claims, equal pay claims, dating back to that Supreme Court ruling back in 2012 that still hadn't been paid. But of course, every month that goes by that wasn't settled, it was going up by between £5 to £14 million per month. So therefore, already we are over almost £800 million. You add on top of that the difficulties of the implementation implementation of the new Oracle financial system that this council has tried to implement. The initial budgeted cost for that was £19 million. The current cost so far is just under £100 million. So therefore, the council this year have got an £87 million deficit, money that they don't have, and so they've had to, of course, put in this Section 114 notice. Of course, the council very quick yesterday and today with these urgent talks going on to say that those essential services will still be protected, things like child safeguarding, adult social care and child social care, but of course things like bus services, things like libraries, particularly the opening hours with them, are things which could well be affected. There couldn't be a commitment on whether the implementation of those services would still be the same. So it could maybe that bins are only collected every 2 weeks, maybe instead of every week, and other things in ways in which this council will have to look in the future to save money. Of course, some of those also includes raising council tax as well. We know as other councils, when they've had to put in Section 114 notices, that they've had special dispensation to put a council tax increase up in some places 10%, other places 15%. Now this year, with this council, Birmingham City Council put the council tax up by the maximum they could do, 4.99%, before it'd have to go to something like a referendum. So there are different ways that this council can raise money, of course, but the people here on the street of Birmingham have given their reaction to this council going effectively bankrupt.
You know, just a shocker. It's just very surprising. It's just all down to the management, I believe, anyway. So
I'm quite shocked to hear this, knowing how amount of council tax they take, amount of property they own in Birmingham. They're one of the largest city council in Europe, and I don't know. I'm just when I heard this, I'm so surprised.
Well, I'm very, I'm concerned naturally for the residents of Birmingham, and also people who are, they're suffering financially at the moment, and I'm not surprised. But after the Commonwealth Games, and we were promised all that money, and it's going to be great for the city, what's happened. But I understand the reason why, because of the pay demands.
Oh, it's just the way it is in Birmingham, isn't it?
Yeah, so obviously with the reaction there and obviously the financial problems that the council find themselves in, paying for things which aren't necessarily deemed necessary are going to have to be cut back, including, of course, possible funding towards the 2026 European Athletics Championships that were meant to be taking place here in Birmingham at the Commonwealth Games Stadium as well. At the council continuing today.
OK, Jack, thanks very much indeed for that. And reaction from Birmingham, reaction from the City Council itself, a spokesman saying, we implemented rigorous spending controls in July and we have made a request to the Local Government Association for additional strategic support. Issuing of a Section 114 notice is a necessary step as we seek to get our city back on a sound financial footing so that we can build a stronger city for our residents.
Despite the challenges that we face, we will prioritise core services that our residents rely on, in line with our values of supporting the most vulnerable.
So that's the situation in Birmingham. What's the situation on the news desk? Rhiannon's got the latest headlines for us.
Mark, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1:33, your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has defended his funding decisions on schools whilst he was Chancellor in the wake of the crumbling concrete crisis. He was responding to questions from the Labour leader, who'd earlier visited one of more than 100 schools which have been ordered to fully or partially shut down. During the first PMQs after the summer recess, Sir Keir Starmer blamed the scale of the problem on Conservative government failures. But Rishi Sunak says the government acted decisively in the face of new information. And just before PMQs began, the government published the long-awaited list of schools that have been affected by the crumbling concrete. Of the 147 identified, 19 have had to delay the start of term. It's also been revealed that pupils at 24 schools across England will be offered some remote learning and 4 will switch to full remote learning. And you can see the full list on our website, gbnews.com. The glitch, which affected hundreds of flights last week, is said to have been caused by an extremely rare set of circumstances. The National Air Traffic Services boss says the system failed to process a flight plan properly, and the odds of that happening were 1 in 15 million. Around 250,000 people were affected over the bank holiday weekend, with more than a quarter of flights cancelled on the Monday. And September's heatwave is set to peak tomorrow with on Saturday, with Met Office saying the temperature could rise as high as 33 degrees in London. If it does, it'll be the UK's hottest day of the year, though further north it will be cooler. The UK Health Security Agency's issued an amber warning for heat until Sunday evening. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2560 and €1.1694. The price of gold is £1,534.48 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,393 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
This September, the GB News family is back together. From breakfast, right across the day, breaking the latest stories, and every evening. And don't forget the weekend. We've got the whole of the UK covered. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country, with fun, lively and intelligent conversation with the biggest guests. This September, we'll meet Chris and John. Thank you for choosing GB News. We're proud to be Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast,
breakfast, whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Live Desk. We want to tell you about Diamond, a UK science facility in Oxfordshire that's been granted more than £500 million of investment. The Science and Technology Secretary, Michelle Donnellan, announced that today.
Well, it's a leading health, engineering and environmental research facility making huge contributions to treatments for diseases from cancer to HIV, as well as kick-starting many drug developments and even vaccines for COVID-19. Our economics and business editor was our health editor, maybe, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. And this is just no ordinary outfit. I'm just looking, is it producing light 10 billion times brighter than the sun?
This is, amidst the gloom, this is a British good news story. This is the synchrotron facility at Harwell in Oxfordshire. A synchrotron is a sort of massive telescope. It's 10,000 times more powerful than a traditional microscope. You use it to really analyse materials, and as you say, it uses light beams to work out what's going on within materials that are 10 million times more powerful than the sun. It can be used to examine artefacts, so some of the stuff from the Mary Rose, the wreck,
really?
to date the Mary Rose and understand the molecular structure. How did that wood survive? What kind of wood it was? That was examined using the synchrotron, the diamond light source, as we call it, at Harwell in Oxfordshire. It can be used to look at the atomic structure of certain drugs, not least the COVID vaccine, as you said. And what we're talking about today is that the government, plus the excellent Wellcome Trust, one of our leading charities in this country that makes grants with the kind of scientific and medicinal under those subject headings, they are investing £500 million between them in this new facility in Harwell in order to upgrade it. And I had a chat with the Science Secretary, Michelle Donnellan, earlier. Here she is.
And what we're announcing today is the government investing over £500 million so that they can replace this technology and take it to the next level, which will allow experiments to get broader, more illuminated, actually, because the light will increase in intensity and brightness, which will mean that we can continue to produce cutting-edge science and research, which ultimately will help improve the lives of everyday people.
Do reflect, we actually rolled out the COVID vaccine really quickly. We're right on top of it. You know, we beat the world in terms of that. Is this sort of kit directly responsible for that, and will it help with more COVID?
It was certainly part of the story. There are around 50 diamond light sources around the world, though the UK, it must be said, has been at the cutting edge of using them. Yeah. This first opened in 2007, this facility. It took 6 years to build, by the way. Over the period of time, we've had 220 companies from around the world have used it. Some 14,000 scientists have worked from this facility. The government says we should give them their due, and this is a cross-party thing. This isn't an advert for the Tory party. Yeah. This is a cross-party thing. It's one of those excellent areas of public life where people actually work together. The government and the Wellcome Trust between them have spent about £1.4 billion over the years on this. This next upgrade will last until 2030. And independent studies suggest that from that 1.4 billion, we've had about 2.6 billion of economic returns, and the patents linked to this facility are worth more than £10 billion. So when we talk about productivity, when we talk about where does economic growth come from, when we talk about the wealth of nations, it's facilities like this that really make the difference. Yeah. A chink of light.
Yeah, and of course when the
economic gloom.
Governments are accused of not investing. So, but we have to mention while you're here the oil price.
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Mark. That's kind. I did want to mention the oil price. Look, it's not like anything specific has happened today, but oil is now knocking about around $90 a barrel, which is up from the low 70s back in July. And I'm concerned about that. I wanted to reflect that because there'll be a lot of car drivers, van drivers out there that are seeing petrol prices go up.
People think of getting their heating oil for the autumn.
Seeing diesel prices go up.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot, haven't we? We're coming into the winter now. Kids are back at school. This winter, the energy crisis could actually be pretty rough, even though most politicians are assuming it won't be.
We'll talk about this in more detail in the next hour, because it's,
Absolutely.
as you say, worrying a lot of people. Liam, for the moment, thank you very much indeed.
Buckingham Palace has confirmed that the King and Queen will conduct their long-awaited state visit to France from the 20th to the 22nd of September.
Well, you may remember originally scheduled to make that visit back in March, but we had the widespread rioting in the country in Paris and particularly down in Bordeaux too, where they were due to visit, because President Macron's pension reforms had caused all sorts of problems, which meant that Germany became the first destination on that state visit and not France. But, of course, we reflect that there is a close association with President Macron and the King, bearing in mind the tributes that Macron paid to the late Queen Elizabeth. So how will the visit be viewed in France now? Let's speak to David Chazan, French-based journalist who was updating us, we remember, David, from those streets of Paris during those riots. Rather more bucolic background there now at the moment.
That's right, Mark. I'm in the heart of Burgundy, which, of course, is one of France's premium wine-producing areas. And King Charles will be visiting the other premium winemaking area, Bordeaux. And one suspects that the high point of his visit for him, given his interest in the environment, will be his visit to an organic vineyard there, one of France's first sustainable winemaking operations.
Will the French be toasting it, though, bearing in mind what we saw in the streets the last time they tried to visit?
Well, I think they will, Mark, because I think what we saw in the streets last time in March had far more to do with domestic French politics, with President Macron's attempt to raise the pension, the statutory retirement age, than to do with the King. And although there were a few graffiti in Paris saying things like, "Charles, have you heard of the guillotine?" That's really a very minority view. I mean, the British tabloids made a lot out of it. But, you know, the British royals are immensely popular in France. If I had a bottle of Premier Cru for every time I've seen the British royal family featured on the cover of Paris Match or the other glossy weeklies in France, I would be the proud owner of a very valuable wine cellar. And I noticed this during the marriage of William and Kate. It got wall-to-wall coverage on the French news channels. Then came the death of Queen Elizabeth and her funeral. The French were riveted to their TVs during that, watching it with huge interest. And to some extent, it's a phenomenon of celebrity, the British royals being, in a sense, the ultimate international celebrities. But it also has a lot to do with the sense of continuity that the British royals provide, even where I am today in the heart of Republican France.
And President Macron, he did have very, very warm words, didn't he, last year after the Queen's passing? The royals, they are so good at this soft diplomacy.
They're incredibly good at it, and I think that King Charles will get a very warm welcome here, if only because he has a very good command of French, so we can expect him to do what he did in Germany and address the French in their own language, speaking it very well, and that's something I think will touch the French very much. I mean, we've had a lot of friction in recent years, particularly when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. There was a lot of bad blood between Paris and London. President Macron made no secret of his dislike for Brexit. And so hopefully this royal visit will go some way towards soothing all of that.
David, thank you for that. We'll let you get back to your bottle of Beaune or maybe Volnay with an azure blue sky there in Burgundy. Thank you very much indeed. But we may be able to match them parts of the UK officially in a heat wave. Temperatures 32 today, a hottest day of the year expected there on Saturday, according to the Met.
Cannot wait to get out there. The UK Health Security Agency's amber heat alert remains in place, though, for most of England, except in the marginally cooler northeast, where a yellow alert is in place. Let's cross to GB News' London reporter Lisa Hartle, who joins us from Hampstead Heath. It's looking glorious. Lisa, are there plenty of people sunning themselves and slapping on that cream?
Hello. Yes, well, I don't know if you can see behind me. If I step out the way, you can see there are lots of people in one of the ponds where you are allowed to swim. There's lifeguards there, all getting in there, cooling down as the temperatures get a little bit higher today. So at the beginning of the day, the Met Office predicted we might reach over 32 degrees today. But so far, the hottest place is London with 27 degrees. And as you said, they're expecting that we could get the hottest day of the year on Saturday with possible 33 degrees. So far, the hottest day of the year has been in June. That was 32.2 degrees. So we need it to go above that for it to become the hottest day of the year. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of this heat. Right now, I feel like a sweaty piece of ham. And as the time's going on, I'm getting more and more disgusted by myself. But I have spoken to a lot of people here today who are enjoying the weather, and I think we can hear from them now.
Loving the weather.
Hottest weather of the week, I think.
Yeah, I'm sweating. I've just come out of a sauna from the gym and I'm like still sweating, but we're living life.
Making the most of it.
I mean, the mere fact I prefer this to what we get for, what, 9 months of the year, and we're not very sociable people. Well, I mean, I don't think we are. I mean, if you think of the way we behave on trains, for example, and we get this and people smile at each other. Do you know what I mean?
I love it. I've been stuck in England for nearly a year. Normally I travel the world and I'm used to sunshine everywhere I go all the time. And we've had no sunshine and it's been really disappointing, a reflection of the times, I think. And this is the beginning of a new cycle, and the warmth is warming the soul as well as the body. And I think it's very good for people and we'll become a little more optimistic.
So it will be after 3:30 today when the Met Office will tweet if we have actually gone over today with the temperatures to make this the hottest day of the year.
OK, we'll let you get back to the shade and the cool if you're finding it a little bit too much there.
Did she really say she felt like or looked like a sweaty piece of ham?
Well, I was trying to gloss over that. But anyway, let's bring in Phil Morris now to actually reflect on those figures, because, as Lisa was saying, that we could well beat the temperature so far this year, which is back in June. But what about September records? I can't remember it being 30 plus in September before.
Very rarely indeed. It often isn't very rare this hot indeed. Now, in fact, got to go back to 1906.
That's what I can't remember.
Wave. That's right. It's going back more than 100 years. We had 7 days with temperatures above 30, and Bawtry in South Yorkshire got 35.6. And they had 6 days over 30. Now, we might get to 35 this time, but we might do 7 days above 30, which will be breaking that record for September. So not an absolute heat, but the number of days. It certainly has been pretty spectacular. Remember June, we had that wonderful weather, 14 days of temperatures in the 80s, and July and August, a big disappointment. What's happened now? The high that was sitting over the Mediterranean has moved north. The jet stream has moved north. And we've got some of that wonderful sunny and warm and hot weather for quite a few more days. And you say up to 30 degrees. So far today, we've got Bournemouth gone up to 28, and the sun's still going to be another 2 or 3 hours yet, so we might get to 31 or 32, which will break that record. So 32 is our record, of course, for this year. Last year we made 40, which is 8 Celsius higher, but that was incredible. But it will become more likely in the future with all these conditions. So a lot of sunshine if you're able to enjoy it, and the peak of the heat will be Saturday and Sunday. This is going to last another 4 days across most of the UK. By the end of Sunday, the high pressure is going to gradually move away and cooler conditions coming from the northwest. But conditions in the southeast will still look if they're going to be above average for a few days. So enjoy it while you can. 4 more hot days. I'm sitting in the sun here in Leicestershire, and it's fantastic.
It looks it, Phil. I hope you've got your feet in a bucket of cold water. Let's
I have a beer by my side.
Oh, great.
Beer by my side.
Enjoy it, enjoy it. We also want to show you some pictures of polar bears in this heat wave. There they are. I think they're at London Zoo. Hopefully they are keeping cool. There is some water there to keep them cool. Do make sure if you've got pets at home that they've got easy access to water, don't you?
Yeah, especially if you've got a polar bear. Take care of it. More coming up in a moment.
Rolling
Stay with
Stones.
us.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, it's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Widely sunny and hot once again for the rest of the day. Warm overnight, but the risk of some thunderstorms developing overnight as well. We've got low pressure swirling around to the southwest, and around that, as well as a southerly airflow, we've got the potential for some instability to be released across western parts of the UK. So some thunderstorms, some frequent lightning, some heavy rainfall. Much of this affecting Irish sea coasts through the evening and overnight, although one or two could pop up for the West Midlands into the Manchester area by dawn. Elsewhere, it's largely dry, clear spells, but a warm night. Temperatures staying widely up at high teens, perhaps even the low 20s. And we've got some low cloud and some mistiness creeping into the central belt, eastern parts of England and Scotland by dawn. Much of that retreats back to the beaches by the afternoon, and then it's sunny skies for the vast majority. However, still the potential for some thunderstorms and some frequent lightning, especially around western coasts. Temperatures higher compared with Wednesday fairly widely. We're looking at the mid to high 20s, 32 Celsius possible in the southeast. And then into Friday, we've still got some of this low cloud around eastern coasts, and that will tend to retreat back towards the coast by the daytime. Sunny skies for many on Friday and into Saturday. Temperatures rising further, 33 or even 34 Celsius in places.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Coming up this Wednesday afternoon.
A fiery first exchange of the season between Sunak and Starmer, dominated by the crumbling concrete crisis. The Labour leader claims the country is now run by cowboys.
Just moments before Rishi Sunak got to his feet, that long-awaited list of schools published, 19 have had to delay the start of term.
Is it bearable? The hottest day of the year so far, with a September scorcher of 32 Celsius, as London Zoo splashes out for its coolest customers.
And it's only rock and roll, but we like it because we're taking you live to Hackney shortly. Yes, we've got the Rolling Stones arriving to reveal their first studio album for some 7 years, the first original music for 18 years. That's the red carpet outside. There's a tongue sticking out inside as well. No, we're not going to see that. Anyway, that's going to be in a moment with the Hackney Diamonds LP revealed, and we'll have Mick Jagger, Keith, and also, I think, an indication of Ronnie Wood being there. So all three with US talk show host Jimmy Fallon. All that coming up shortly. First, let's get an update on the headlines with Rhiannon.
Mark, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 2. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has defended his funding decisions on schools whilst he was Chancellor in the wake of the crumbling concrete crisis. He was responding to questions from the Labour leader, who'd earlier visited one of more than 100 schools which have been ordered to fully or partially shut down. During the first PMQs after the summer recess, Sir Keir Starmer blamed the scale of the problem on Conservative government failures.
This crisis is the inevitable result of 13 years of cutting corners, botched jobs, sticking plaster politics. It's the sort of thing you expect from cowboy builders, saying that everyone else is wrong, everyone else is to blame, protesting that they've done an effing good job, even as the ceiling falls in. The difference, Mr. Speaker, is that in this case, the cowboys are running the country.
Well, the Prime Minister says the government acted decisively in the face of new information.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is exactly the kind of political opportunism that we've come to expect from Captain Hindsight over here. Before today, he's never once raised this issue with me across this dispatch box.
Just before PMQs began, the government published the long-awaited list of schools that have been affected by the concrete. Of the 147 identified, 19 have had to delay the start of term. It's also been revealed that pupils at 24 schools across England will be offered some remote learning, and 4 will switch to full remote learning. You can see the full list on our website, gbnews.com. The glitch, which affected hundreds of flights last week, is said to have been caused by an extremely rare set of circumstances. The National Air Traffic Services boss says the system failed to process a flight plan properly, and the odds of that happening were 1 in 15 million. Around 250,000 people were affected over the bank holiday weekend, with more than a quarter of flights cancelled on the Monday. The UK Civil Aviation Authorities launching an independent review. NAT's Chief Executive Martin Rolfe says steps have been taken to ensure it doesn't happen again.
We had a flight plan, the information that comes with a flight, that was unique amongst the 15 million that we've received over the last 5 years. The system took that flight plan, and when it realised just how unusual it was, it couldn't process it in the way that it would normally do so, and decided the safest option was to put itself into a fail-safe mode, if you like.
The final words of the helicopter pilot involved in the crash in Leicester 5 years ago have now been published in a report. Everyone on board, including the Leicester City Football Club owner, was killed when the aircraft hit the ground, bursting into flames outside the stadium. As the helicopter spun out of control, Eric Swaffer could be heard saying, "I've no idea what's going on." Investigators found the pedals became disconnected from the tail rotor, causing it to lose control. Russian mercenary group Wagner is set to be declared a terrorist organisation by the UK. Once it passes in Parliament, it means it'll be illegal to be a member or support the group. A draft order will also allow assets to be categorised as terrorist property and seized. Certain prescription offences can be punishable by up to 14 years in prison. A science facility which kick-started the development of COVID vaccines here in the UK has been given a £500 million grant. Diamond Light Source in Harwell in Oxfordshire is also responsible for advancing treatments for HIV and cancer. The government funds will be used to upgrade the facility, which will take 7 years. Science Secretary Michelle Donnellan says it's a worthy investment.
Highly focused light technology so that we can actually better understand the structures of proteins and molecules. And what that really means is it means that we can advance our technology in terms of production of vaccines, in terms of production of cancer treatments, in terms of malaria treatments, so drug technology.
And September's heatwave is set to peak on Saturday, with the Met Office saying temperatures could rise as high as 33 degrees Celsius in London. If it does, well, it will be the UK's hottest day of the year. Though further north, it will be cooler. The UK Health Security Agency's issued an amber warning for heat until Sunday evening. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio, and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back over to Mark and Pip.
Rhiannon, thank you very much indeed, and welcome back to the live desk. So, the Cowboys are running the country, according to Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, going in on Rishi Sunak as PMQs returned from a summer recess, the first for 7 weeks, and boy, did it go in with a bang.
The truth is, this crisis is the inevitable result of 13 years of cutting corners, botched jobs, sticking plaster politics. It's the sort of thing you expect from cowboy builders, saying that everyone else is wrong, everyone else is to blame, protesting that they've done an effing good job, even if the ceiling falls in. The difference, Mr. Speaker, is that in this case, the cowboys are running the country. Isn't he ashamed that after 13 years of Tory government, children are cowering under steel supports, stopping their classroom roof falling in?
But the Prime Minister came out swinging, accusing the leader of the opposition of political opportunism.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is exactly the kind of political opportunism that we've come to expect from Captain Hindsight over here. Before today, he's never once raised this issue with me across this dispatch box.
Well, a point of order actually questioned that, but then just minutes before PMQs was launched, the government finally releasing its list of those schools affected by the concrete crisis, 19 having to delay the start of term because of the presence of that rack concrete.
Well, let's get more reaction from Westminster and speak to GB News' political editor, Christopher Hope. Was it a draw, Christopher, do you think? I mean, Sunak did have some quite good attack lines, didn't he?
Yeah, I thought Keir Starmer did well. I mean, he basically uses 6 questions by naming a school affected and using that to jump off into a point about the government's priorities. Why on earth are they spending £30 million on the Department for Education headquarters while they're letting children not go to school because the beams might fall in? I thought that made a lot of sense. And the idea of this cowboy builders, a cowboy government, and this idea of not taking care over our national infrastructure was good. But I was surprised, and I think Labour was surprised by the way that Rishi Sunak came out fighting, and he contested the point that the Tory government had axed this building programme back in 2010 by pointing out that the NAO, the National Audit Office, had questioned the value for money of that project. He said that 80% of the schools were excluded, and a third were more expensive than required. So I think there was a bit of a fight back here from Sunak. You almost sense the frustration we heard from Gillian Keegan when she used the F word earlier this week, that this is a problem that's been around for a long time through many different governments, of course most recently 13 years of the Tory government, and it's about time it's on their watch it's happened. But I think a lot of parents at home today will think, well, that's not good enough, and that's fair enough.
Yeah, and in terms of marking the Prime Minister's homework, he made an assertion about Sir Keir not raising the issue in his speech, and that had to be acknowledged then as being incorrect by the Speaker later.
That's right. He said they hadn't been raised in a keynote speech by Mr Starmer or been raised on previous occasions until now, and the Speaker had to step in. I mean, I think it's the beginning again of a kind of getting back into the rhythm of PMQ, so you might allow that mistake.
And also, it was interesting to note that the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, she was not sitting next to the Prime Minister. She was a few seats further down.
Yeah. Yeah, this kind of thing really matters. Normally when a minister's under fire, we think back to Suella Braverman last autumn. They are then sat next door to the Prime Minister. So on all those cutaway clips, we call them in television, you see the PM and the embattled minister side by side. Well, Gillian Keegan was nowhere near. I think, from memory, it was Chris Heaton-Harris and the Northern Ireland Secretary, and in fact Suella Braverman, neither of whom have been in the crosshairs of criticism in recent weeks. So that was interesting. I think that the jury's out on Gillian Keegan. Some think it's a complete faux pas, but I know that a lot of GB News viewers particularly think that she was speaking honestly from the heart when she let off steam in that interview clip that was after the interview had happened on Monday.
To apologise. Let's just address what might happen next in Parliament this afternoon and the parliamentary device of a humble address. We obviously had the schools list published, but Labour now trying to push for the documents that Rishi Sunak may have seen as Chancellor before he made a decision to slash that maintenance budget.
Yeah. That's right. The list of 156 schools affected by the RAC scandal was published just moments before PMQ started, and that was the idea there, is to take away the attempt by Labour to force the publication of that with a vote of MPs. They want Tory MPs to vote against it, then it looks like they're trying to bury bad news or whatever. That hasn't happened, so instead they're looking at a humble address, a way of forcing a vote of MPs to try and get any communication between the DFE and the Treasury about whether Mr Sunak did know what he did when he cut the spending, the capital budget for schools back in 2020, forgive me, in 2021 when he was Chancellor. So it's a political device to put further pressure on the government. I did ask, by the way, Mark and Pippa, from a briefing I've just been to, when will this end? Because the PM did say that it would just take weeks to get mitigation in place. Well, they won't put a timeline on it. I offered them October, they wouldn't give me that. So I'm afraid this will go on and on.
Right, OK, with 19 schools at the moment, of course, not even able to start term properly. Chris, from the moment at Westminster, thank you for that.
Chairman of the Campaign for Real Education and former head teacher Chris McGovern can talk to us all about this now. Good afternoon to you, Chris. There seems to be two narratives here. One, that there are a number of schools that had funding withdrawn a few years back that have subsequently found to have got dodgy concrete. The other narrative is that actually new information has emerged. And Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, what she's done the last few days, the action she's taken, was actually being overcautious. Which side are you on with that?
Look, there's a third narrative as well, I'm afraid, and that is that there's always been plenty of money. I don't think Rishi Sunak necessarily understood that with regard to the education budget, we spend more in this country per head than almost any other country on the planet. The trouble is, too little of it was allocated to building repairs. So what should have happened, and the Department for Education should have advised Rishi Sunak and his predecessors, that money should have been transferred from one main school budget into the building budget. We spend a massive amount. And so when I hear this ding-dong in the House of Commons this morning between Conservative and Labour, I say a plague on both your houses. You're both responsible. We've spent more money than almost any other country on the planet on education per head, and yet we're in this mess. And the Romans, I'm a historian, the Romans 2,000 years ago were building in concrete, which still is strong today. And we can't even get it right for concrete, which is going to last 30 years. So I say a plague on both their houses. I say the narrative, the true narrative is we need to look at how we spend the money on our education system. And it's absurd that the majority of staff in our schools are not teachers. We need to look at the non-teaching staff, cut those a little bit and transfer the money into building projects. So I don't go with Rishi Sunak and I don't go with Keir Starmer. They're both to blame, or part of the policies are to blame.
And it's an interesting issue because Priti Patel, of course, who is one of the Essex MPs, the county worst affected, raised this issue about capital spending, praising Essex County Council for the way that they'd handle the issue. And, you know, we are trying to find out where is the extra money coming from. Is it from the existing capital budget, which means other things may have to be salami sliced?
Well, as I said, the money is there, and if you don't have a big enough capital spending budget and enough money to spend on buildings, then you're going to have problems. And in Italy, which our country I know very well, they've had similar problems with bridges falling down over Genoa, people dying, and they've had a proper survey. They've looked back over 30 years. We need to know who the guilty parties are here. Making it into some sort of party political game is a nonsense. Gillian Keegan has taken a lot of flack, perhaps quite rightly. But she's done the right thing. She's actually admitted there is a problem, and that's more than some people did over the last 30 years. So we need a bit of honesty in all of this, and the honest thing is we spend plenty of money on education. Why wasn't it going into building repairs? What are we doing with all the money?
Well, let's ask that question. Is it the Department of Education itself that may have failed? Because we've got Jeff Barton from the Association of School and College Leaders saying that a lot of schools, a lot of education authorities have actually sent the various questionnaires back to the Department of Education and yet are still getting requests. Some have sent it 3 months ago.
Yeah, I think the Department for Education is trying to wash its hands of all of this, and it's getting a bit too involved in blaming people. The Department for Education, including those senior civil servants, they need to be giving advice to chancellors about where the money is going and how it's being spent. We come back to this point. There was never a shortage of money. I tell you what, if I was in the Department for Education, I'd be quite worried today because the floors in that department are made of concrete. They might be all coming down very shortly. There is a real problem there.
Well, yes, on that note, we'll wait and see what the surveyors come up with. But Chris McGovern, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts joining us here on GB News.
I want to bring you some breaking news from Ukraine because at least 16 people have been killed in a missile attack on the Ukrainian city of Konstantinivka. President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that those killed were people who did nothing wrong and has warned the death toll could increase. That death toll is believed to include a child.
Yeah, there's some videos being released on his Twitter feed. You may have to accept that there are some rather alarming scenes here. here. You can see that explosion at the top of the picture. Now, President Zelensky saying these people did nothing wrong, that it was a market area, but it is close to one of the battlefields underway where, of course, the Ukrainian forces are trying to push the Russians back. So whether this was a deliberate, targeted attack by some of these pictures you may find distressing, that an indication that some of these missiles went astray, but these pictures just coming through showing widespread devastation in this civilian area.
Yeah, regular market, shops, a pharmacy, according to President Zelensky, was hit. He does say the number of casualties could rise further, and he branded it heinous evil and brazen wickedness, with Russia, he says, being responsible. These are the pictures that the president himself has tweeted in the last few minutes.
Yeah, just to reiterate, you may find some of the images distressing. This is an attack on the Mercury shopping centre in the town in the Donetsk region, and it hit several cars and market stalls in this particular area. Zelensky saying that Moscow had indeed targeted people who'd done nothing wrong. Warnings that the number of dead may rise as obviously rescue workers and medical teams get in. Zelensky adding Russian evil must be defeated as soon as possible. More on that as we get it, but clearly distressing scenes there in Ukraine.
Do stay with us here on GB News. We will be satisfying you. Yep, we're talking about the Rolling Stones, who are launching a new album. Talk to you shortly.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Widely sunny and hot once again for the rest of the day. Warm overnight, but the risk of some thunderstorms developing overnight as well. We've got low pressure swirling around to the southwest, and around that, as well as a southerly airflow, we've got the potential for some instability to be released across western parts of the UK. So some thunderstorms, some frequent lightning, some heavy rainfall. Much of this affecting Irish sea coasts through the evening and overnight, although one or two could pop up for the West Midlands into the Manchester area by dawn. Elsewhere, it's largely dry, clear spells, but a warm night. Temperatures staying widely up at high teens, perhaps even the low 20s. And we've got some low cloud and some mistiness creeping into the central belt, eastern parts of England and Scotland by dawn. Much of that retreats back to the beaches by the afternoon, and then it's sunny skies for the vast majority. However, still the potential for some thunderstorms and some frequent lightning, especially around western coasts. Temperatures higher compared with Wednesday, fairly widely. We're looking at the mid to high 20s, 32 Celsius possible in the southeast. And then into Friday, we've still got some of this low cloud around eastern coasts, and that will tend to retreat back towards the coast by the daytime. Sunny skies for many on Friday and into Saturday. Temperatures rising further, 33 or even 34 Celsius in places.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
This September, the GB News family is back together. From breakfast, right across the day, breaking the latest stories, and every evening. And don't forget the weekend. We've got the whole of the UK covered. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country, with fun, lively and intelligent conversation with the biggest guests. This September, we'll meet Chris and John. Thank you for choosing GB News. We're proud to be Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
In Hackney to unveil their brand new album. Yeah, it's Mick, and it's also Keith and Ronnie, the Strolling Bones, the Rolling Stones, arriving on the red carpet.
Turned 80 years old. They will very shortly be launching their new album, their first in a number of years. They'll be interviewed by Tonight Show host Jimmy Fallon. This is going to be a bit of a worldwide moment. They've been teasing it a lot over recent weeks. This is live,
and
they're minutes away from telling us what this album is.
Yeah, it's going to be called Hackney Diamonds, which is why they're doing this world first in Hackney. And of course, it is pretty poignant because it's the first time since the death of Charlie Watts, the drummer, back in August 2021, that they've revealed the new music, and we're being told that it's going to be all original music, because they did a blues cover about 7 years ago, but they're back with a vengeance, and
and those other two unknowns, Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr, they're said to have contributed to the album as well. Let's see if we can hear what's going on now.
The Survivors: Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Ronnie Wood, the Rolling Stones. So, now to date, they've released 23 studio albums, but they haven't released a studio album of original material since A Bigger Bang 18 years ago to this very day. But is all that going to change? Well, this is where the world finds out. So let's update ourselves on how we got to where we are today. It may have been a while since their last studio album featuring original music was released, but there's been new music since, like the brilliant Doom and Gloom and the track Living in a Ghost Town just 3 years ago. Living in a Ghost Town! 2016 also saw the release of the chart-topping and Grammy award-winning album Blue and Lonesome, which brought together some of the band's favourite beloved blues tracks. So
we will, of course, return to Hackney when Mick Jagger, Keith Richards and Ronnie Wood appear on stage, which will be very soon. They've done a brilliant marketing campaign for this new album, haven't they? It's fantastic. But let's talk business and the economy, Mark.
Yeah, oil prices climbing above $90 a barrel for the first time this year, making it the highest price since November 2022. And, of course, that may well hit inflation once more, higher prices at the pumps feeding through to transport costs and all the other add-ons.
It follows the decision from Russia and Saudi Arabia, two oil-rich nations, to prolong plans to withhold supplies. Our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, joins us now with On the Money to explain all. We might have to cut you off for Mick Jagger, but let's try and talk about this.
Them's the breaks.
Yeah.
I'll get the guitar. At least I can play the guitar. He can barely play the guitar. He's done all right for himself there.
Seriously, why are they withholding supplies?
So the oil price is probably the most important price in the world. Oil isn't just used for petrol and diesel. It isn't just used as an energy source. It's used in plastics, petrochemicals. It is really very, very important for the global economy. China's been slowing down. The global economy remains sluggish, which you'd think that oil prices would stay quite low, but they've really been surging. Oil prices are up 20-25% over the last couple of months alone. Let's have a look at this graph here, which we've just put together in the GB News newsroom. There we are, back at $70 a barrel in July this year, and we're now up at not just bouncing around below and above $90 a barrel, a 20-25% increase there. And this is a real issue for the economy. This is going to make people at the Bank of England think, should they be raising interest rates? And it's also going to aggravate inflation, Pip.
And is this politics rather than economics, in that we've got both Saudi Arabia and Russia, this OPEC plus, if you like, starting to squeeze the system by reducing output?
Well, let's have a look at some bullet points here, if we can see the next graphic. So oil has just hit $90 a barrel for the first time this year. That's the highest since November 2022. And it is partly, I think, down to politics. Russia and Saudi, as you say, Mark, they've extended cuts to supplies. We thought they were going to reduce supply, reduce their output in order to push up prices only to October. They're now going to do that until December.
Right, so they've extended
they've extended it. This is OPEC plus. Saudi Arabia, of course, run OPEC, the exporting cartel. Russia isn't in OPEC, but it is a major oil and, of course, gas exporter. They're now working together, which is really difficult for the West to stomach, because Saudi has generally been a Western ally, right? But Russia-Ukraine has changed a lot. And these higher oil prices, they do mean that inflation is likely to be higher than it otherwise would have been as fuel costs go up. And that could be what tips the balance when the Bank of England comes to make its next interest rate decision on the 21st of September.
And many motorists have already been thinking over the last few weeks, blimey, you know, fuel prices has already gone up. And yet it's going to happen again, and we don't know where it's going to end.
We don't know where it's going to end. In August, you're dead right, Pip, so I've got some numbers here. In August, the price of petrol, on average, surged by nearly 7 pence in August alone.
So we need to cut you off. Here's Mick Jagger. Rolling Stones are about to appear on stage.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are live around the world. This is global. This is very important. A lot of people are watching this.
Very early in Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's very early in Los Angeles. I have one question. What is this about? What is this for? Why are we here?
Well, we're here. I feel like I want to stand up. Yeah. We're here. Yeah. But we're here to present our new single, which is called Angry, and the video of it, which you'll see later. And Angry is the first single from our new album called Hackney Diamonds, which is why we're in Hackney, and which comes out in October the 20th. That's right. So that's why we're here.
New single, Angry, I will say right after this Q&A, we'll be showing you the video, world premiere of the video with someone really cool that you all know is in the video. And the album comes out October 20th. Hackney Diamonds, what does that mean? What does that mean to you, Keith? Anything? What is Hackney Diamonds?
It got called Hackney Diamonds because I think we were flinging ideas around for titles, and we went from hit and run, smash and grab, and somehow between that,
I like those.
We came up with Hackney Diamonds, which is like a variation of them both, and also it's a London band, you know, and we thought that was.
But does Hackney Diamonds, isn't it like a type of slang?
Yeah. It's like when you get your windscreen broken on Saturday night in Hackney, all round it. And all the bits go on the street.
Yeah, a shattered windscreen.
That's called Hackney
smash and grab.
That's Hackney Diamonds.
That's Hackney Diamonds right there, yeah, exactly, yeah. Ronnie, how long did it take to make this album?
We did it pretty quick, actually. There were lots of ideas floating about, and we gathered them all together just before Christmas last year and made a go of it, didn't we?
Yeah. We did.
We cut them all
But I mean,
very
it's been
quickly.
18 years since you made it.
We've been very lazy.
There was a blitz on.
That's not very quick at all.
We have done something. We've been on the road most of the time. But we were a bit too kind of like lazy, and then suddenly we said, well, we go. Let's put a deadline, and let's make a record and put a deadline. So Keith and I and Ronnie had this chat, and we said, okay, we'll make this record Christmas, and we're going to finish it by Valentine's Day.
So we made 2 albums.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So we went into the studio, in, like Ronnie said, in December, and we cut 23 tracks, and very quickly, and finished them off in January, and mixed them in February.
Yeah.
Something like that.
You started in
about right.
That's about right.
That's about right.
Yeah.
Did you go with Keith in Jamaica? I heard rumors of that, where you started?
In Jamaica, we wrote Angry, actually, and Mick had the thing ready to go, but it's where we kind of put the track together, and along with many others, but it was the first one to stick out, and they said, boom.
Yeah, we started out Keith and I and
Steve.
And Steve and Matt went to Jamaica we said we're going to mess about in the studio. And we went there and we started kicking ideas around. Then we went to New York and Ronnie joined us. And then after that, we got a producer called Andy Watt, who kicked us up the arse.
Yeah,
and then we went to Los Angeles and cut the tracks like I told you.
And did it must feel different not having Charlie Watts in the studio with you playing? What was that like?
It's all, you know, it's ever since Charlie's gone, it's different, of course. You know, I mean, he's number 4. He's missing, he's up there.
Yeah, I did see a lot of number 4s around him.
Yeah, of course he's missed incredibly. But thanks to Charlie Watts also, we have Steve Jordan, who was Charlie's recommendation for if anything should happen to him, Steve Jordan's your man.
He picked Steve Jordan.
Yeah, just out of way back. But, and also, you know, he's been a friend of ours. I've worked with Steve. So it was a kind of natural progression. You know, it would have been a lot harder without Charlie's blessing on that, you know. But at the same time, it's a hard team, you know.
Did you get to do any tracks with him on the album?
With Charlie?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's 12 tracks on the album, and 10 well, I think actually it's not true because it's not on one. But most of them with Steve, but 2 are tracks we recorded in 2019 with Charlie. And so we used 2 of the tracks that we recorded with Charlie before.
Yeah, Live by the Sword and Mess It Up.
Yeah.
Those are the 2 tracks.
Yeah.
And also I heard a rumor of Bill.
Yes. Bill, and we asked Bill to come into the studio.
It's creeping.
Did he get it?
Live by the Sword.
And Bill came in and did 1 track, so we had the original Rolling Stones Within the Sections is on 1 track.
Wow, that's so fun.
But most of it's new, but this is from 2019.
Yeah. The first song is Angry. Is Angry a theme of the album? Is that?
Well, Keith and I thought the theme of the album should be...
You're getting angry as I'm saying
every
this.
track should be
as
angry theme.
You're singing the edges. Angry. I don't want to see you get
disgust.
Yeah, and anger and disgust.
That's the concept.
Yeah, so every song is angry.
Every
Yeah.
song is angry.
Is every track name angry?
not every track named Angry could be. I think that's stupid.
It's stupid, yeah,
That's a stupid idea.
but also no one's done it yet, so why not do it?
No, that's an original idea. But then we sort of,
Nobody can be angry that long.
You got to meet my in-laws, yeah.
So then we had a second idea, which was not to make it about angry every track, but to make them a bit more eclectic and have a few love songs, ballads, country kind of things. So we got a mixture. So
I think the last time I saw the three of you, you played Hyde Park here in London. It was amazing. And Hyde Park, if you've never seen this show, it's beautiful. It's in the park and it starts around 7 o'clock. The sun is out and then the sun goes down and out. Everyone's out by 10 o'clock. It's very British rules. Everyone out. Everyone. Go, 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 go. Everyone out. Never happened. Go, go, go. And so it was a great show. And I talked to you the next day. I talked to Mick and I said, what'd you think of the show? I thought it was great. How'd you like it? And you go, well, you know, we're not really a daytime band. I thought that is so funny.
It was like Sympathy for the Devil at 8 o'clock.
You don't want to paint it black while you're eating a sandwich with your kids.
Not really.
Yeah, but do you think of yourself as a nighttime band, yeah?
It usually is.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But this album can be played at any time of the day.
Any time of the day, any part of the world you want, any time of the day.
Hackney Diamonds, track 3 could be played at, you know.
Or track 4, you could play track 4.
Don't you dare!
No,
Don't you dare!
You could play track 4.
Okay.
5 and 6.
5 and 6 as well.
Tomorrow in Australia.
Tomorrow, they've already listened to the album. You're right. That's great. Keith, I always think of this story with you when you were on my show, and thank you for doing my show.
No problem.
We were backstage, and you were smoking, and you're not allowed to smoke in a studio, and these alarms went off, and a fire marshal I didn't even know we had a fire marshal. A fire marshal came down to the studio and said, Mr. Richard, you know, you shouldn't smoke. And you go, I know it's bad for my health. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. And it was, at the time, it was true.
Do you still smoke?
No, man. Right after that, I gave it up.
There you go. You owe me. You owe me. This is the 24th studio album. 24th for you guys. Can you remember the press conference for the first?
Yeah, I remember the press conference. So Keith and I were in a pub in Denmark Street, and we had the album, and there were 2 journalists, one from the Enemy and one from the Melody Maker. We bought them a pint of beer. We said, here's our album.
That's it.
Have a listen. And then we went out. That was it.
Yeah, that's the press conference, yeah. A little different than what's happening.
Well, there's no photos, nothing.
Nothing, no.
It sold well.
Yeah, how were the reviews?
The reviews were mixed, but it sold well.
Yeah, that's good. When a singer wants to make a record, they want to make a record. You want to get the band while they're hot.
When the singer wants to make a record, you record him. Because you never know the next time you're going to get it. So when Nick said to me, I've got something, I want to make a record, I put all the bullets underneath and said, let's go.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know, isn't it? You know, that's all I've got to do.
I haven't told you that before.
No, you shouldn't have told me now. It's good to know. That's all I've got to do.
Yeah. And Ronnie, you're always playing. I just saw you recently playing with Van Morrison or something. Do you just jump up and play with bands that you love?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I keep my chops together between gigs, and you've got to keep your fingers moving when you get to our age.
Yeah.
Keep everything moving.
This is interesting.
Do you want to elaborate on that?
He's getting all this older, you'll realise what I mean.
You'll go down. Keep everything moving.
Shake it out. Shake it out.
Can I go through the track list here and just right now? I think fans would like to know the track list. First song is "Angry."
Yes.
Yes. Does that bring any emotion to you?
Anger. That brings anger.
It's a bad question. Sorry. Oh yeah.
Got a good riff.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thinking about the words, I was just thinking it's a damn funky riff.
Yeah, it is a good riff. It's a good riff.
Thank you.
Get close.
Yes.
Depending on you.
Yeah.
That's when you always want to rely on someone and they let you down.
Yeah.
That one's not about me, is it?
No, it's not.
All right,
You're here. You've come all the way from New York.
That's right.
Don't mess it up is about you.
Bite my head off.
Bite my head off. That's like when your girlfriend gets really mad with you and you say, will you please stop talking
don't bite
at me, darling?
Yes.
It's a rude way of saying that.
Yeah, it is a rude way of saying it. Whole wide world.
Is that what it's about?
Yeah, it's what it's about. Let's sink in.
Funky riff. Whole wide world. Really funky.
Really? Dreamy skies.
So, yeah.
The main news from that, we've got a new album from the Rolling Stones coming out
eventually,
on October the 20th.
So the single is out now, the album is out a bit later, so we've still got a little bit of time to wait, but they're releasing Angry, although not too angry, certainly in that news conference there in Hackney. Matured. I just added up their combined age, you ready for this?
Go on.
235. But they are wearing well, I have to say.
Mick Jagger turned 80 years old in July, and they recorded this new album largely over a couple of months. And in a wonderful tribute and in memory of Charlie Watts, he actually does feature on a couple of tracks, because they did 2 tracks with him in 2019 before he sadly passed away in 2021. And Bill Wyman's also involved on a track
that's going to be a mouth-watering prospect. The original lineup on one of the tracks on that album, with Charlie on drums and Bill Wyman on bass. That would be interesting to hear that again. But from rock royalty to real royalty, because Buckingham Palace has released details about the King and Queen's long-awaited state visit to France. It will be taking place, we're told, on the 20th and 22nd of September.
Yes, it had to be dramatically postponed. The visit originally scheduled for March, but called off due to widespread rioting in the country over President Macron's retirement age reforms. And it meant the royal couple made Germany the destination of their first state visit.
Let's get more now with our royal correspondent Cameron Walker, who can join us with the details. And Cameron, we think, having spoken, of course, a little earlier in France, that the vineyards will be very high on the agenda.
Yeah, they certainly will be, Mark. As we know, the King loves all things organic and sustainable, so the royal couple are expected to tour an organic vineyard which has been pioneered with a sustainable approach to winemaking. That's going to be happening in Bordeaux. But as you said, this is the postponed state visit to France. It was meant to take place at the end of March, but because of those riots due to French pension reforms, it would have been perhaps pretty embarrassing for the French government to have a foreign head of state, the King and Queen, visit the country where buildings are literally burning to the ground. Now, a senior Foreign Office official has told GBNews that this visit, the French state visit, is taking place in the context of a relationship that's been steadily improving since the Franco-British summit held by President Macron, inviting Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to the Elysee Palace even at the beginning of March. And the last one actually took place 5 years before that, and within that 5-year period we had all the turmoil when it came to Brexit. So this is seen really as the British government, the British Foreign Office, asking the King and Queen to turn on the charm offensive, I would say, and it comes off the back of the highly successful German state visit. And from my understanding, since that state visit to Germany took place, there has been a lot more talks between the German government even, and the British government when it comes to foreign policy, to trade, to culture, and they're hoping more talks on defence off the back of the German state visit. So that just goes to show the power of soft diplomacy which the King and the Queen can have when they take part in these visits. A couple of highlights: they're going to be laying a wreath at the Arc de Triomphe in Paris alongside the French president. There's also going to be a bilateral meeting at the Elysee Palace between Emmanuel Macron, the French president, and His Majesty the King. There's also going to be, maybe controversially, maybe not, a magnificent state banquet at the Palace of Versailles. That's something we talked about when the riots were going on, and whether it would give off the wrong look. But nonetheless, British officials and French officials feel like...
Oh, what a shame. Cameron Walker...
Should we put another 50 pence in the meter?
I think we can get back to Cameron.
Cameron, keep
I can
peddling.
still hear you.
Yeah, keep peddling.
I can still hear
We've
you.
just
Can
had
you
the
still hear
signal
me?
break up for the moment. But an important point you're making about the state banquet, because we discussed this at the time, and it was decided that really would be the wrong look, given all the political sensitivities in France at the time. But they clearly now think that the situation is calmer.
Yeah, a bit like Marie Antoinette, perhaps, back in the day. They do believe the situation is calmer. Buckingham Palace keeps security details, understandably, very under wraps, but they have made the decision that the King and Queen will be visiting France for these state visits. But something which obviously wasn't going to happen last time was the Rugby World Cup being hosted by France when the King and Queen are there. We heard earlier this week that the Prince and Princess of Wales will be attending a couple of matches this weekend. But as for when the King and Queen are visiting, there are no home nations playing. However, Buckingham Palace has told us today that they are going to be meeting community sports groups and perhaps a few sports stars as well relating to the Rugby World Cup. We're not sure what the venue is as of yet, but I'm sure there'll be a few sporting themes smattered throughout the three-day state visit as well.
And what is also very helpful for King Charles is that his command of French is excellent, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly is, and the King is expected to become the first British monarch in history to address the National Assembly at the French Senate. Pretty significant. He is expected to do the speech partly in French, partly in English. We saw during the German state visit in the Berlin part of it, the King became the British head of state to address the German Bundestag, the German parliament. So again, it's similar themes here. The King, brand new monarch, and also pioneering in new ways to strengthen the relationship with our closest neighbours. It really is that power of soft diplomacy in action. As for the French people, the French crowds, we saw in Germany that they were very popular despite the pouring rain in Hamburg. I remember I was there getting very wet. In France, we don't know what the reception is going to be. As we saw in March, the riots were pretty violent, pretty substantial. Clearly not to do with the King's visits, it was more to do with a domestic policy issue there. But it will be interesting to see how the French people receive the King and Queen when they are out and about in Paris and Bordeaux, particularly when it comes to the State's banquet at the Palace of Versailles. Of course, so much French history happened in that building.
And Cameron, quick reflection, of course, that this week, a poignant moment because we've got the first anniversary of the death of late Queen Elizabeth, the family still in Balmoral. This French visit will be the first, I guess, major event for them after that. This is a time where they will be gathering with different things on their mind.
Yeah, from my understanding, as far as we're aware, the first time we'll see them is the state visit to France. The King and Queen are both going to be reflecting Friday, the anniversary of the late Queen's death, privately at Balmoral Castle, where the Queen passed away. As for the Prince and Princess of Wales, they are expected to be out and about in public. There have been some newspaper reports that Wales is the destination of choice. We don't have details yet as to exactly where their Royal Highnesses will be going, but we are expecting them to be out and about and be paying tribute to Her late Majesty, because of course it's a year ago today that I was stood outside the gates of Balmoral Castle where the late Queen was appointing Prime Minister Liz Truss as her final Prime Minister. So yes, what a year it's been.
Cameron at Buckingham Palace, thanks very much indeed for updating us with all that.
Now, how are you finding the heat today? Parts of the UK is officially in a heat wave. Temperatures could hit tomorrow 33 degrees Celsius, and the hottest day of the year is expected to be on Saturday. That's according to the Met Office.
Well, the UK Health Security Agency has got an amber heat alert in to actually dampen things down, except the northeast, marginally cooler, the yellow alert there. What about London? Lisa Hartler, our London reporter, is on Hampstead Heath. Are you on alert there?
Hello. Yes, well, behind me are the people who I'm probably most jealous of in the entire world at the moment. There's lots of people in the pond there swimming. It's a pond you're allowed to go in, lifeguards, and a couple that came out of swimming from there, they said It's about 20 degrees in the water, and they just said it improves the rest of their day because it gets their body temperatures down a little bit. So as you were saying, last time I spoke to you, the temperature in London was 27. That was the highest temperature of anywhere in the UK. That's now risen, the Met Office said, to 30. Now, to be the hottest day of the year, we need it to go above 32.2, which was in June. But yeah, can you believe this is September? Lots of people I've been speaking to here today are just so happy. They said they feel like summer's back, and we've got just a few of them that we can hear from now.
Loving the weather.
Hottest weather of the week, I think.
Yeah, I'm sweating. I've just come out of a sauna from the gym and I'm like still sweating, but we're living life.
Making the most of it.
I mean, the mere fact I prefer this to what we get for, what, 9 months of the year, and we're not very sociable people. Well, I mean, I don't think we are. I mean, if you think of the way we behave on trains, for example, and we get this and people smile at each other. Do you know what I mean?
I love it. I've been stuck in England for nearly a year. Normally I travel the world and I'm used to sunshine everywhere I go all the time. And we've had no sunshine and it's been really disappointing, a reflection of the times, I think. And this is the beginning of a new cycle, and the warmth is warming the soul as well as the body. And I think it's very good for people, and we'll become a little more optimistic.
And now we've reached 30 degrees today. That's really unusual for September, with the meteorologist earlier saying that that's only happened 4 times in the last century. So we'll just see how long this heat wave continues.
Lisa, thank you for that. You've got a bit to go to beat it. 32.2 hottest so far, so we'll leave you out there for a little longer.
We'll also leave you with the polar bears in Staffordshire that are keeping cool in all this. Good job they've got a white coat, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit of water. It doesn't look too deep there, does it? We were thinking that maybe they'd be getting a bit of a splash to keep them cool. I think he's finding it tough going.
Well, as many people are, but it is probably the last dose of summer, so do enjoy it wherever you are, and do take care. We're back tomorrow with the Live Desk here on GB News.
Things hotting up now with Patrick. Stay with us.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, it's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Widely sunny and hot once again for the rest of the day. Warm overnight, but the risk of some thunderstorms developing overnight as well. We've got low pressure swirling around to the southwest, and around that, as well as a southerly airflow, we've got the potential for some instability to be released across western parts of the UK. So some thunderstorms, some frequent lightning, some heavy rainfall. Much of this affecting Irish sea coasts through the evening and overnight, although 1 or 2 could pop up for the West Midlands into the Manchester area by dawn. Elsewhere, it's largely dry, clear spells, but a warm night. Temperatures staying widely up at high teens, perhaps even the low 20s, and we've got some low cloud and some mistiness creeping into the central belt, eastern parts of England and Scotland by dawn. Much of that retreats back to the beaches by the afternoon, and then it's sunny skies for the vast majority. However, still the potential for some thunderstorms and some frequent lightning, especially around western coasts. Temperatures higher compared with Wednesday, fairly widely. We're looking at the mid to high 20s, 32 Celsius possible in the southeast. And then into Friday, we've still got some of this low cloud around eastern coasts, and that will tend to retreat back towards the coast by the daytime. Sunny skies for many on Friday and into Saturday. Temperatures rising further, 33 or even 34 Celsius in places.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
This September, the GB News family is back together. From breakfast, right across the day, breaking the latest stories, and every evening. And don't forget the weekend. We've got the whole of the UK covered. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country, with fun, lively and intelligent conversation with the biggest guests. This September, we'll meet Chris and John. Thank you for choosing GB News. We're proud to be Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel.